Okay, let's be real. Euphoria is no longer a show about high school drama. Forget the glittery eye makeup and the scandalous hookups. It's been almost 5 years. Hell, I was in my 20s when this show first aired, and now I'm in my 30s, so let's face it, we've all grown up, and so have they, and it's time for them to face the reality and face the consequences of their actions. After years of radio silence, behind the scenes controversies, and heartbreaking loss of the cast members, we are officially back. Welcome to my breakdown of Euphoria Season 3, Episode 1. We're catching up with the crew, seeing who's evolved, who's spiraled, and asking the big question, have they changed for the better, or are they just finding new ways to ruin their lives? Let's talk about Rue, Lexi, Jules, Cassie, Nate, and of course Maddie, and break down the scenes, themes, and possible foreshadowing and much more. Full spoilers ahead. We open in Mexico's largest state, Chihuahua, with Rue, who hasn't been up to much good since high school, as we find her deep in the mud, quite literally. She gets some help by the locals getting out of the mud, as we'll later see that this is a part of a drug run for Lori. Recklessly driving, she makes it to the border, completes a transaction, and she attempts into driving Lori's truck over the gate, but she gets stuck and has to leave Lori's truck behind, almost seriously injuring herself in the process. Now, looking at this image of Rue being caught between this gate to me is a representation of where Rue's life is at the moment. Trying to balance back and forth between life and death, always one step closer to making a bad decision, caught behind being stuck and moving forward with her reckless ways. Now in Aladose, Texas, Rue stumbles into a barn where a little girl offers her the best fucking milk she's ever had thanks to a cow named Dahlia. Now Rue breaks bread with this super Christian family by the name of the Millers, and they're under the belief that Rue is doing the Lord's work by exposing the evils going on across the border for her college newspaper, as we watch them say goodbye to her and wishing her well on her trip. Now, the family's daughter, Daisy, drives Rue to her Greyhound and shares with her how she's never been on the internet before and how she desires to experience what that life is like, as Rue tells her that she's basically not missing anything and she wishes she can switch lives with her, as she drops Rue off and she eventually makes her way to California. Now, if you listen closely to the score from this more cheerful, hopeful music, but as soon as Rue crosses over to California, we see, number one, a snake crawling from a rock, which is symbolism for a little bit later for the forbidden fruit, and you can see that the score begins to sound more sinister and more dark, as these are just signs towards danger for Rue. Now back at Lori's, we get a look at Rue's reality. The opening job we saw at the beginning was Rue just completing what was simply a minor drop in an endless bucket. With 46 months of 20% interest, Rue's debt has ballooned to over $43 million to Lori. We flash back to the moment when Lori found Rue working at a smoke shop years back, and this being the beginning of when Rue became a drug mule for Lori for the last few years. We see Rue doing a few runs where she has to swallow a bowl of drugs concealed in many balloons, which could actually lead to death if one of those balloons broke open inside someone, but after a few runs, she decided she needed help, and that comes in the form of Faye, who we remember from Season 2. Now, for those that don't remember, her boyfriend was Custer, who was the reason Ashtray and Fezco were raided in Season 2, and she tried to warn them, but obviously we remember it was too late. But now she and Rue are essentially human suitcases swallowing balloons of drugs to clear customs. Now look, the van humor of seeing them crossing the border and the dog peeing and their stomach having issues, it was some much needed comic relief over this serious situation. But then we take this sharp turn into what I like to call what the hell did I just watch category. We see Rue returning back to Lori's house and she's about to shit her pants. Meanwhile, we see Faye already has done so, and we see a dog coming up behind her and licking the soil from her butt. Yeah, I think we can all agree that we did not need to see that. Now, after the raid, we learn that Lori left her old operations behind and went into business with her cousin Harley and his son Wayne. As we can see, as long as business continues to thrive and they haven't gotten caught, Rue, who has become their best mule with the help of Faye, they are a part of this possibly inbred, weird, happy little drug-dealing family, and I'm sure nothing bad will happen to them. Now, while at the dinner table, we get some foreshadowing for later in this episode. We see Rue sees a scene on television that I couldn't make out what movie or show it came from, but it's essentially a man buried in the dirt with his head sticking out, and then we get this shot of a rat crawling underneath the table. Now, the man with his head sticking out of the dirt is seen in a much different context later on in this episode with Alamo, but what about this rat? To me, the rat could represent or symbolize her or someone at this table becoming a rat and snitching and destroying this whole operation from the inside at some point this season. Now the question is, will it be Rue or Faye or someone else at this table? Now, later that night, it appears that Faye and Wayne have a little romantic thing going on, as Faye tells Rue that Wayne is looking to get out of the game and move into the avocado business, and he stashed all his money and important items in his safe. Now, after she said that, you can literally see the light bulb go off above Rue's head. Now, we don't hear any more about the safe for the rest of this episode, but mark my words, Rue and Faye are absolutely going to target that safe by the end of the season at some point. Now, if you have been following a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, you know that there's been a lot of unfortunate and unexpected things that have happened. Now, one of the more recent behind the scenes dramas, it deals with Labyrinth, who is the show's main composer, who left the show and removed his music entirely from this particular season. I bring this up because very early on this episode, and honestly throughout this episode, I personally felt the absence of his music because I'm such a big fan of his music. Number one, I have both seasons downloaded on my phone. I listen to it pretty frequently. Like, the score for both seasons of the show is nothing short of spectacular. So going back to his absence and the music choices overall, yes, Hans Zimmer is a part of the score this season, and Hans Zimmer to me is the GOAT. He's the greatest film composer of all time, in my opinion. But when it comes to Lab not having his hands in this show and in this episode in particular, I feel like his music and his score is a character within itself, and to me, it was sorely missed in this premiere episode. Now, meanwhile, on a lighter note, we see Rue has a side hustle to make up for her millions of dollars in debt by being an Uber driver. As she says that she gets to drive around some interesting people, which I'm pretty sure we're going to eventually see her maybe driving one of the other characters at some point, and that's how our storylines will probably inevitably cross with Rue and Jules and Maddie and all the different characters that aren't in scenes together in this episode. But we see her driving this Batman impersonator to meet up with other members of the Justice League and the Bat family. Now, it's nice to see that Lexi are still friends and Rue sometimes stays over. But we can see that Rue still lies to her best friend, as she says that she was recently in Arizona visiting her little sister Gia. Now, for those who do not know, Storm Reed has already been confirmed to not appear in this season. Unfortunately, we will be seeing Rue's mom again at some point, but again, we won't be seeing Gia this season. Now, Lexi is still responsible, she's still a caring friend, and she wants Rue to do good and be in a good place in her life, and she's concerned about Rue's future with her job. Now, Rue shares her experience with the Miller family and how peaceful their lives seem without technology or internet, as Lexi shares her 2 cents about this religious family and them being Christians, which she says makes them very judgmental. Now, I found that to be very funny because it's almost like the pot calling the kettle black, as Lexi is literally judging them about their faith. Now, this religious curiosity from Rue's spiritual exploration that we've seen all the way back in season 1 definitely feels like it will be a very important thread and a backbone of this character's arc throughout this new season. Now, it's here that we actually get a reference to Fez, as Rue tells Lexi that she should call him. We find out that he's serving 30 years after the events of the shootout in the raid in season 2. Now, we all know the tragic real-life loss of Angus Cloud, so we obviously know he won't be appearing on screen, but the show seems to want to keep him alive within the narrative. To me, Lexi's hesitancy to call him seems to come from a place of having seen enough of the drug world to know what it does to people, and she's traumatized by being dragged back into that toxic orbit. So my question is, will she actually make the call? I'm very interested to see how they handle his absence in this season and how this story progresses moving forward. Now, sticking with Lexi, we see she's working in Hollywood on a nighttime soap as an assistant. Her boss, played by Sharon Stone, goes by the name of Patty Lance, and she is an industry legend, and it is clear which side of the political spectrum she's on and her production team is on as well, as Lexi feels right at home. Now, we do get another quick scene with Lexi later on this episode, but since we're talking about her, what can we expect from Lexi Lexi this season. Now, after her polarizing meta disaster that was the Oklahoma play in season 2, I'm predicting we'll see Lexi trying to assert more creative control, pushing for influence, and probably not receiving the credit that she believes that she deserves. Plus, there's a hint later on this episode of a potential romance with a young celebrity in the mix, which may tie into her sister Cassie and Maddie getting involved as well. So I can overall definitely see Lexi definitely trying to climb that ladder within the industry, but the question is, what will she be willing to sacrifice to find her way on top? Now, speaking of Cassie, as Rue says, we find her living in a right-wing suburban bubble, and we can see that she is fully committed to the bit. She is literally pretending to be a puppy dog, shaking her ass on top of a doggy house, eating and drinking out of a bowl, crawling around, letting her housekeeper record her, all to become an influencer. Meanwhile, in comes Nate to find his soon-to-be wife and housemaid making puppy dog content as he's at work all day and comes home to find her doing this. We watch him snap his fingers to have the maid go back to work, and we can just basically see that he's forcing Cassie, or at least in my eyes, he wants her to basically be his trophy wife. But we can clearly see this is an ongoing argument between them as he's afraid of being looked at as a joke and that her content could be affecting his job if any one of his investors find one of her videos and basically thinks that she's a prostitute. Now we watch as Nate plays along with her content as a dog as she crawls towards him and tells her that he's got money, there's no reason for her to work and become an influencer. This whole scene was a very interesting reminder of their very unhealthy relationship. As we remember and as we can see now, it's still toxic. Nothing has changed between the two. There seems to also be some money issues that Nate hasn't shared with his fiance because he hasn't made the remodels to the living room and other places in the house, claims that he's just investing in his business. Again, to me, their relationship has and will always be a show. They think that they're in love with each other, but instead they love the idea of others thinking they're this perfect couple from the outside, but inside, again, I think it's just all a show. Now, was it me or did Sam Levinson fold in Sydney Sweeney's real-world persona and political discord with her being called a right-winger? Meanwhile, we have Nate being Nate, of course, but actor Jacob Elordi is also channeling his best Wuthering Heights energy. When we see him grabbing Cassie's leash and calling her a good dog, was it me or for all those that seen Wuthering Heights, was he giving off some Heathcliff energy and kind of those levels of manipulation of what he did with Isabella? Now, going back to what they've been up to, we see Nate has been taking over his father's business, and Rue says that business hasn't been easy for him, especially working in Southern California as he prepares for their big up-and-coming wedding. Now, we can see behind the scenes that Nate's business is probably failing. He's faking construction workers to impress an investor for this Sun Settlers development project, and Nate assures things are going smoothly. Now, I think it's a safe bet to assume that this investment project will probably blow up and go to shit, and it wouldn't surprise me if Cassie's videos plays a part into that. Now, back with Cassie, who also puts on her own show, we see her with her neighbor talking about Nate's viewpoint on her posting online.
If Fred ever tried to tell me what I could and could not post on social media, I'd castrate him.
He just doesn't get the online world. I mean, people make so much money using it.
The conversation adds more to the idea that there may be some money issues they're afraid to address with one another, as Cassie wants the most expensive wedding to happen and doesn't want money to be an issue. And here's where she brings up how much money she wants to have and how she can make it fast if she goes on OnlyFans.
Are you really considering this?
I mean, I wasn't. Not until Nate started nickel and diming me.
So what would you be posting?
I don't know. Probably the same stuff that I post on Instagram.
So why would people pay for it?
The conversation about OnlyFans being pornography is brought up, but we see Cassie sees it more as an opportunity to create a deeper connection with her fans for about $50, and they'll get a personalized video saying good morning to them, and it'll be like they're being closer to her and making them think that they're special to her. Now, to be fair, when I first became aware of the popularity of OnlyFans, I also thought of it more of like a modern version of online porn, which, no judgment to anyone that's on OnlyFans, and it is very true that there are many other things you could do on the platform, and it's not just about adult content, but as far as the plot is concerned, it wouldn't surprise me if Cassie does end up showcasing more adult material and that causing a bigger problem between her and Nate. To me, it seems pretty apparent that she is desperate for this wedding and to look a certain way, and she's starting to treat her life like a product to be sold. Now, back with Lexi and Rue, we get our only reference to another lead character of the show who actually doesn't appear in this premiere episode. Lexi tells Rue that she had heard from Maddie, which we cut to that scene of Maddie telling her that Jules is a sugar baby.
A sugar baby?
A hooker.
But there's a difference, right? Sugar babies don't have to have sex.
That's like hiring a chef who doesn't cook.
Again, we don't see Jules in this episode, but it wouldn't surprise me if she's maybe working with a new character that we meet later on. Now, speaking of Maddie, who is one of my favorite characters of the show, we see that she also works in the industry as a manager who represents influencers and some actors, including an actor by the name of Dylan Reed. Now, Dylan is this heartthrob known for his work on LA Nights, and someone Lexi seems to have a crush on, despite him thinking that her name is Lisa after giving a great note to one of his scenes on his show. Again, this Dylan Reed and Lexi could be a romantic subplot, and Lexi giving notes to the projects and maybe again not getting the credit that she believes she deserves might be an issue at some point later this season. Now, back to my girl Maddie. We see her working on the red carpet, answering phones at the management company she works for, and despite it not being the most glamorous job and being paid as little as $900 a night, she's great at her job, especially talking to the talent and convincing them to do impress. Now, we can see Maddie lives in like this basement situation of an apartment, and again making less than $900 a night, which isn't a bad amount of money. I wish I could make $900 a day, but neither here nor there. $900 living in LA, living in Hollywood isn't really that great of money. It's kind of crazy to think about Maddie and Cassie and thinking about them earlier in the seasons, right? Seeing Cassie now chasing this high-end lifestyle and wanting to have this big expensive wedding while Maddie is literally hustling for rent. Now, based on the trailer and also based on little tidbits in this episode, we know that Maddie will be helping out Cassie with her content sooner rather than later. Now, the question is, will they be switching positions by the end of this season? Look, whatever happens between Cassie and Maddie and of course Nate, I am here for all the chaos and drama.
Don't worry. This is just the beginning.
But back with Rue, we find her at Frank's diner meeting with Ali, talking about giving her life over to God.
That's hard.
Why?
Because how am I supposed to give my life and will over to the care of God?
Easy. You believe in something greater than yourself. That something is God. God is good. That is that.
I've never been into the whole believing in God thing,
This conversation and just this scene right here felt the most like season 1 and 2 to me, and felt like that special episode before we got season 2, as they're discussing the Bible and the technicalities of how gay people, or in particularly gay men, and butt sex was called out for being wrong in the Bible. There's so many misinterpretations and mistranslations all about the Bible, but at the end of the day, it comes down to having faith or not, and Rue is being sold.
Okay, I'm sold. I'm making the decision, God be my witness, that I'm going to read the Bible, okay? And when I do, I'm going to read every word as absolute fact.
God damn, you ain't got to be so extreme about it.
No, Ali, you said it yourself. Either you believe or you don't believe.
We all know that this has been a long time coming, that Rue's always trying to find something to be addicted to, something to get her mind off of falling into relapse and get into drugs again. So it doesn't surprise me that she's now leaning more into religion, as we see her listening to an audiobook about the Bible while in the middle of doing an Uber, which was just a hilarious scene how all that played out. Now, going back to Ali, huge Coleman D'Amico fan, huge fan of Ali the character, and I love that he's still in Rue's life, even though he's probably not aware of what her working relationship is with Lori and how she's dealing with all the drug stuff and being a mule. But putting that aside for a second, as we all know since the beginning of the show, all of these actors have become like mega stars and household names, and Coleman Domingo is one of those household names. He has become one of my favorite actors. He's been doing a lot of great stuff on not only television but also movies, so I do hope that we do get to spend more time with his character this season, because if I'm not mistaken, I believe the credits said that he was one of the producers of the season, so I am very excited to learn more about Ali. We learned a little bit about him in that special back before episode or season 2 began. So hope we get more Ali, hope we get more scenes between Ali and his family and obviously Rue, and I just want more Coleman Domingo because he's one of my favorite actors. Now we cut to the next morning at Lori's and we get to see their drug operation under this horse stable as Wayne needs Rue to do a drop off with a big buyer. Now we get some more foreshadowing here as Wayne is making Faye chicken as a romantic gesture for dinner, and it's just going to be them two as we see him removing this chicken's head and blood spills onto his shoes as he looks at Rue. To me, this is just more signs of Rue and images of heads, which ties into what we're going to see by the end of this episode. Now, it's also important to point out that maybe Faye or even Wayne decided to have Rue drop off the package. We saw that Faye was actually the one that made the drugs that was given to Rue. Knowing what happens later, was it intentional on any of those characters' part to have Rue be the one to drop off the drugs and ultimately being blamed for what ends up happening? Now, we see Rue arrives to this big buyer's house and he goes by the name of Alamo, but Rue being Rue, she has to go inside to use the restroom and she's given instructions by this character by the name of Bishop not to look at anyone, not to touch anything, and just come in and out. But of course, we all know that Rue, again, being Rue, she's looking around and not just going straight to the bathroom, and she's looking at this huge house as she comes across a girl in the bathroom who needed help with putting on her bra or her bikini after getting her boobs done, and we can see that Rue couldn't be happier to help. Now, after telling Rue to just go to the bathroom and come back, we see Alamo's, I guess he's his bodyguard or his muscle, again by the name of Bishop, as he finds her dancing with the other girls. Bishop grabs her and is about to toss her out until Alamo sees her and asks for him to bring her to him, despite being told that she works for Lori.
You walk up into my house, dance with my girls, and you don't even introduce yourself.
Now we watch them share a drink and talk about his line of work of being in the business of women's majestic power between their legs. Now, to be more professional, I would imagine that his LinkedIn profile says that he is the owner of 5 of the dirtiest strip clubs in California, but also something tells me that he's also probably selling these women at the same time. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out if Jules is a sugar baby, she's probably a part of his business in some way, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he might be involved in possibly trafficking these women as well. Now, Rue takes this opportunity to pitch her dream job as working in clubs, troubleshooting, and also causing a little bit of trouble at the same time. Now, right now, it seems like Rue wants to switch one evil for another evil, and she wants to get from under Lori and works for Alamo, but also want to point out, it was so cool to see other members of Alamo's crew, including young actor Asante Black, who you all might remember, at least the last time I saw him was on one of the best miniseries of all time with When They See Us, but also for my football fans out there, we see future Hall of Famer Marshawn Lynch. So 2 actors and 2 characters that I'm really interested to see how they play into their story as well. Meanwhile, needing a new career path of their own, we cut back to Cassie as we see her looking, or should I say stalking, Maddie's Instagram, and we see her with other celebrities, and I think this is the point where we're seeing Cassie's getting the idea that maybe Maddie could help her with her plans of becoming internet famous as well. Now, at their candlelight dinner, Cassie brings up their wedding flowers, which is going to cost around $50,000, which is crazy. And Nate, this is the only time I probably will ever agree with him. He thinks this is a crazy idea to have that amount of money worth of flowers. But Cassie got a solution, and that is she wants to pay for them for herself. Now, she shares her idea of joining OnlyFans, and he immediately jumps on her for wanting to do porn for flower arrangements, and they share a bit of a laugh. It's here we watch as Cassie gaslights Nate as she looks at him and tells Nate that she will do whatever she needs to do to get those flowers because she didn't wait her whole life to have a ghetto wedding. Now, we watch Cassie use a very old Jedi mind trick by money shaming Nate by saying that maybe they don't need to have a wedding because he can't afford it, which clearly triggers him into talking about his job and what he's doing. But we ultimately see Nate caves into the idea of OnlyFans, and the only thing he wants is to make sure that she doesn't show her boobs and her face at the same time. Now, talk about foreshadowing, we cut from this scene to this scene. Back at Alamo's, one of his girls dies because of the drugs from Lori's, which was laced with fentanyl. Again, was the intention on Lori's part Wayne or Faye, or was it just a coincidence that this girl died at this party? Now, speaking of coincidences, again, going back to what I talked about foreshadowing, we go from Cassie seamlessly getting the okay to doing OnlyFans to immediately cutting to a face of a dead girl. So, was the show just foreshadowing that Cassie will end up dead at some point this season? Rue now in Alamo's office, and clearly he's pissed to what happened to one of his girls, and he thinks that Lori is sabotaging his operations. Rue goes on to share her origin story between her and Lori, dating all the way back to high school, and meeting Alamo is maybe a sign from God. But looks more like she is getting a sign from the devil to work with Alamo, who wants to test Rue's faith, and he takes her outside.
Do you believe in God?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's see if he believes in you.
He places an apple, which isn't a coincidence considering all the religious undertones and symbolism within this episode. We all remember the story of Adam and Eve, but more importantly, the forbidden fruit. The apple being something that was given to Rue, and that being the representation of the devil, and that being Alamo. As he places the apple on top of her head, and with his golden gun, and remember all the head references from the movie earlier on in the episode, the chicken getting his head ripped off, well, now we see Rue will have to keep her head on at the moment, leaving it all up into God's hands, but also to Alamo's aim. All she had to do was a simple drop off of drugs and leave, but Rue now finds herself with an apple on her head, the forbidden fruit on her head, and some stranger about to shoot it off, and luckily for her, she gets a blessing, or maybe a curse from the universe, as he clears her head only to shoot the apple, and Rue lives and laughs in joy, thinking that this was some divine intervention, but in my eyes, in reality, she just went from one evil person to another, as we end the first episode of Euphoria for the first time in 4 years. We open this week's episode with learning about what Maddie has been up to since high school. She arrived to the city with no safety net, no money, but a suitcase full of clothes, but she had a plan. This plan of hers involves finding Miss Penzler, who works in the talent agency management, and Maddie wants to work for her despite not going to college. Maddie doesn't play the entitled Gen Z card. Instead, she leans into the one thing that gets her attention, and that's Maddie's belief in capitalism. Maddie's blunt, she's sharp, and she's already acting like she's her assistant by answering her phone before she's even hired. And it works, but then the pandemic hits. This is where the pivot happens, as Maddie realizes the 9-to-5 life isn't enough to sustain her lifestyle that she's projected. While at home, Maddie took notice of a young girl who traveled out west by the name of Caitlin chasing fame. Maddie reached out to her to help this young influencer grow her social media, and eventually she became her manager. After Caitlin grew to have 1 million followers, Maddie thought it was time to get more provocative and sexy by showing off Caitlin's body, and this would include some feet pics.
Side boob, under boob, camel toe, little ass cheek, feet.
Feet?
Feet. Dirty feet.
Ew.
Feet being cleaned.
Okay.
Someone kissing your feet.
Like who?
We're basically watching Maddie become Caitlin's online pimp while assuring her mom Solange's rent check clears. From here, things become more explicit, where she's selling 4 videos, 10 pictures, all for $20. Caitlin's X-rated content online blows up with the help of Maddie, and her talents get recognized by young up-and-coming star Dylan Reed, who you remember we met from episode 1, as Maddie had them meet up to help Caitlin become even more famous. Now, unfortunately for Maddie, her boss isn't happy about reading the headlines and the porn star optics. Maddie tries to explain the change in the industry for people like Caitlin, who are now going mainstream despite their perception. But Maddie is forced to drop the golden goose to keep her job as an assistant.
So she was forced to let Caitlin go.
I'm sorry. I just don't have the time you deserve.
Flash forward 1 year later, Caitlyn's showing off a check she made for over $700,000, a big commission that would have been in Maddie's account if she only had listened to her instinct, and her days as an assistant would have been behind her by now. But now tying this into episode 1, where we found Cassie, we see Maddie got a DM from her saying how much she missed her and she wanted to meet for lunch, as this is their first time talking since high school. Now, Maddie sees that Cassie's follower count on Instagram is under 4,000 followers, thinking that it's maybe time to try what she tried to do with Caitlyn on Cassie, making this her next project. So first off, I love the fact that we open this episode with Maddie because she's one of my favorite characters.
Bitch, you better be joking.
To me, I've always viewed her as like a modern day Cher from Clueless, but with a lot more edge. Now, of course, Maddie's not perfect. She's made some dumb decisions in season 1 and 2, especially with being with Nate. But here's the thing. We all know someone that's like a Maddie, and we've met a Maddie at some point in our lives. It's that one person that walks into a room like they own the building. It's the person who looks expensive even though they're struggling to pay their phone bill. Again, I really enjoyed this opening scene because I felt like it set the table for the rest of this episode as far as the mood and the tone and the theme of showing how these characters use their personality or their persona to hide their emotions and pretending to be okay. Now back with Rue, who's now working for Alamo. He's got her doing grunt work around his ranch. It's here we see Rue doing something that she's never done before, and it feels like she's crossed a line that there's no coming back from. He has Rue getting rid of any evidence to what happened to Trish, who we know overdosed on fentanyl, as this is Rue's first time covering up a death. Now, it looks like this cover-up will come back into play at some point this season because we see Rue gets rid of the rug that Trish died on, and as she's rolling it up, some piece of what looks to be like jewelry fell on the floor and Rue didn't notice it. Again, we've seen Rue get into some really messed up situations, but covering up a death, that's a whole nother level of messed up. And if you can do that, what else will Alamo have Rue do? Let me know in the comments below. At this point, is Rue too far gone to come back from this? Now, I'm also curious to know what they did with Trisha's body. Did Bishop take care of it? Did they bury her body somewhere in the miles of dirt outside his ranch? Either way, I feel like this cover-up will be on Rue's conscience for the rest of this season, and we see that in this episode. And again, I feel like there will be major consequences for this. Meanwhile, we see that Alamo wants reparations from Lori after what happened with the laced drugs, but Harley had to make it a race thing.
Is that how we're doing this?
You the one talking about reparations?
Last week I had mentioned, did Wayne or Faye purposefully sabotage the product and want to blame it on Rue? Well, I somewhat got that a little bit right. We flash back to before Rue dropped off the package at Alamo's and see that it was a mistake to have the products laced with fentanyl. Faye accidentally forgot to clean off the scales, and unfortunately it got mixed in with the ecstasy that Trish took. Now Alamo doesn't want money from Lori, instead he wants Rue, but we know how much Rue is in debt to Lori, so she's not having it. But since they killed one of his products in Trish, he's taking Rue, and the beef between these people begins. Now Rue going from one bad situation into another, going from one bad person to another, this is the deal with the devil that we talked about last week. Rue's trade-off is that she's out from under Lori's thumb for now, but she's just moved into a different kind of cage. Now after cleanup, Alamo gives Rue $300 in a promotion, and he sends her to a strip club by the name of the Silver Slipper. Now Rue gets the rundown of what they offer their clients and the rules of the strip club, all given to her by a new character by the name of Big Eddie, played by Kadeem Hardison. Shout out to Dwayne from A Different World. But also, for those who grew up on the Disney Channel, Kadeem played Zendaya's dad on KC Undercover. Then from the Disney Channel Saving the World of Spies, moving on to HBO selling drugs at a strip club, man, time flies. Now, as Big Eddie gives Rue more rules, we see Rue is distracted. She spots a dancer by the name of Angel. A perfect name to go along with the more religious theme so far this season for Rue, but this Angel ain't here to spread the gospel of God. Instead, she's spreading something else, if you know what I mean. I can't help but imagine how dope Elaborate's score would have been in this scene, but as I digress, we see in perfect Euphoria fashion, we see Angel doing her job and ensures that her client is happy. Meanwhile, we watch as Rue cleans the toilets. Now, this is where the plot thickens. As Rue gets paid for the day, she overhears the girls talking about Trish and how she's missing, and of course, Rue knows exactly what happened to her. Now after work and now outside, we see Angel offers to have some fun with Rue as they hook up in the back of Rue's van. And while having fun, we hear Rue talking about how she can't help but to think of Jules. Now flash forward to a few years ago, we see Rue would still visit Jules in the city. Things were never the same between them after high school, and plus Rue wasn't in a great place after relapsing. We see Rue calling her mom and needing help and wanting to come home, as we learn that she hasn't been sober since. Now it appears that some time has passed because we see Rue is fully integrated into the club and her role at the club, as we get our first look at Spanish pop star Rosalina, who is one of the strippers.
Understand? ¿Y si me mandan un detective privado, qué hago? Huh?
Who are you talking to? I don't speak Spanish. Get out there and make this money. We're going to have a real problem.
Déjame llevarlo. Let me wear it.
Please, take your broke neck ass out there and get this money.
Again, I don't know if it was maybe days or maybe even weeks, but we see Alamo is still pissed about Lori calling him a pig, which was a funny moment between him and his crew. Now we see Angel pressing Alamo about what happened to Trish, and she isn't buying his excuses about her mysteriously disappearing with some guy at his party. Now in the back, Rue listens in on Angel leaving Trish a voicemail, voicing her concerns about where she is, and she tells her she loves her, as we later discover in this episode that they were actually best friends. Now you'll notice that Trish's picture was removed from her area, and I bet Alamo had someone remove that way that Angel can forget about her. Now we always know that Rue's looking for an angle. When Eddie was putting the money away in the safe, Rue had to turn around, but it kind of looked like she was looking at a mirror to see the code, and I wonder, will this be the second safe that she break into, remembering Wayne had one that was mentioned last week. Meanwhile, Alamo believes it's time to remind Lori who put her on the map, as we see this come into play at the end of this episode. Now, and maybe the most unexpected and shocking moment of this season and in this episode so far, we see that Rue and Maddie have kept in touch after high school. We see them talking about Rue sharing what's going on with her life, her not talking to Jules or her mom in 2 years, and her time with working at the club.
But in the club, we all fam.
Now, Rue tells Maddie that she wants to catch up with Jules, and Maddie and Rue just seem to have a pretty solid relationship, right? Like, I just found it so funny when Maddie told Rue that she was meeting up with Cassie by gesturing big boobs and crying, and when Rue says, "Round 2, baby," again, this whole scene, this whole dynamic was just mind-blowing to me. Like, seriously, I would have never suspected Rue and Maddie to being friends after high school. Besides, like, that one scene that we saw Rue snitching on what's going on with Nate and Cassie, have they ever had like a one-on-one scene together? Either way, I hope we get more scenes between them, because again, I would have never expected them to be friends, especially after high school.
Man, I miss high school.
I don't.
Now, speaking of Cassie, we continue to see just how desperate she is for attention, as her and her housekeeper are taking nude photos of her with melted ice cream on her boobs in the front yard, by the way, for all the neighbors to see, to her soaking wet coming out of a pool, to her posing as a naked baseball player. But the wildest picture of them all is her dressed up as a baby, all for this to be posted on her OnlyFans. Now, these two characters haven't seen each other since the incredible play put on by Lexi with Oklahoma, as it is time for old friends Cassie and Maddie to meet up. Both are desperate to project this image of "I'm doing better than you," as Maddie rolls up in a fur coat, fake talking on the phone, while Cassie looks at her like she's a starstruck high schooler. Again, I can't stress it enough, I'm trying to get by, but it's just hard to not notice this, but I hated the music choice in this scene, but we see the conversation inevitably shifts to Nate. Cassie admits she should have gotten Maddie's blessing first, but as Cassie says, she found the love of her life, but at the expense of losing the other love of her life, that being Maddie, as Maddie looks at her diamond ring. And it was in this moment that Maddie decided maybe it's time to really get back on Cassie. After a few drinks, Cassie started letting out the truth about her vision of herself and how others perceive her and how she looks and how she would be much larger online if people really knew who she was. The conversation goes into Cassie's online presence and her cute dog videos and it not being sexy in Maddie's professional opinion, which Cassie mistakenly slips up by saying that's why she brought her here, that's why she wanted to meet up, and it wasn't just to apologize. Cassie tells Maddie that she can do anything or be anyone online, and she desperately needs this form of validation from complete strangers. Maddie agrees to help with her content, and we all know that this isn't going to end well. Now, taking a moment to reflect, we cut to Nate and Cassie's house, where we get the return of Cal, played by the late great Eric Dane, who sadly passed away a few months ago. Over the last 5 years, we see that Cal's life has completely changed from when we first met him back in season 1. Once a well-respected man of his community and a top real estate developer, to now being broke and known as a sexual deviant who nearly avoided time in prison. You can see this strange newfound honesty between them as Kyle brings up that he heard from one of his sex groups about Cassie's pictures online and asks if his son's having financial problems, but Nate assures him that they are tasteful pictures and that he's financially stable. But we see that Nate is farthest from being good when it comes to his finances. We meet a new character by the name of Nas as Nate pitches an idea to have his new development project be partnered with Nas in his funeral business. It's clear that Nate is stalling for time and trying to distract Nas from the fact that he owes him over $550,000. Nas seems to be a good guy and suggests that Nate pay him $100,000 by the end of the week to regain his confidence. Now, Nate, very similar to Cassie, Maddie, and Rue, all in too deep in covering up their weaknesses or insecurities and masking their face with smiles while being too afraid to admit that they need help. Now, back with father and son, again, we can see this relationship is much different than before, as they now are at the point in their lives where they can speak openly about Kyle's past affairs with men and women over the years. We see Kyle tries to warn his son about this path they're going down, as we see Nate prepares dinner to pitch his neighbors on joining on his development project in order for him to pay that money fast, and again, that being $100,000, paying it to Nas by the end of the week. Now, back at Paradise, we see Angel is literally throwing a fit at Eddie and Rue about feeling like they're both lying to her about what happened to her best friend. Rue, seeing how much this is hurting her, she tells Angel the truth as she tells her that Trish died of an overdose. Now, it's clear to me that we see this part of Rue that feels bad for what happened to Trish, but also what Angel's going through in the moment, because we know how many times Rue has found herself on the verge of overdosing herself. Now, if I'm being honest, the performance from the actress that plays Angel felt a bit shaky to me. It was kind of hard to really kind of buy into her emotional scenes. Having her being upset and angry, and when she learns the truth about what happened to her friend, I just couldn't take her seriously in those scenes because I didn't think she was that great of an actress, if I'm just being honest. But now the question becomes, should Rue have told her the truth or kept the lie going, because Rue can see that Angel began to spiral after learning what happened to her friend. Now, we don't see Angel doing this in this episode, but I do wonder if she shared what happened to her friend to the police, again, wondering where her friend's body is actually buried. From here, we see Angel passing out during lap dances, sleeping in her car, to physically feeling ill. Now, Alamo's at his end when it comes to Angel, and he suggests that she either go to rehab or else he's going to be getting rid of her, being a part of his business. But knowing that she can't afford rehab, Alamo would take care of her rehab expenses if Rue can convince her to go, and if she does so, she'll get another promotion. Now, Rue thinks that this is a good offer and thinks that Alamo isn't that bad of a person until she finds out that having a rehab under his payroll is just a part of his business. So it's not coming from this place of him having a good heart, rather than it's just the sooner she can get clean, the sooner he gets back to making money off of her. Now, cut to Angel fighting with Rue about going to rehab, as Rue has never been on this side of an intervention before, but she manages to get Angel in the car to seek out help. On the way there, Angel talks about how many people go missing in California and how she feels like there's this big magnet underneath the grounds of Cali that attracts evil. Now at the rehab, Rue can see that this isn't a legit place for someone to get clean, especially considering the front desk lady looks like she's currently using as well. Despite knowing this place isn't properly served, we see Rue lets Angel check in. Again, I can't help but to wonder, is Rue actually doing this because she wants this promotion, or is she doing this because she thinks that any rehab is better than no rehab? Now, at the same time, I can't help but to think of the butterfly effect. Think about it. If Rue hadn't owed Lori money, she wouldn't have had pulled Faye into the drug game. If Faye would have been focused, Trish would still be alive. If Trish was still alive, Angel wouldn't be checking into this sketchy rehab. As you all can see, it all leads back to Rue's choices. Now, as Rue is back in the van and she's checking in with Bishop, we see the camera cuts to a lingering shot. As we can see, Rue is being watched. Now, if the trailers are any hint, we know that Rue will be into a interrogation scene, so it's safe to assume that these are probably police that are watching her. Now, later that night at the party, we see Nate in his full used car salesman scamming mode. We see him talking to his neighbors and convincing them that his latest business venture is a can't-miss opportunity. Meanwhile, Cassie is over in the corner acting like she's showing off family photos, but they're actually her OnlyFans content. We watch her explaining the baby fetishes her fans have, and it just horrifies her neighbor. Now, that same neighbor who we met last week runs straight to her husband, who is actually suspicious. While the husband thinks Nate's business is booming, the wife is rightfully concerned that the math isn't mathing for the wedding budget. Now, back inside, we see Nate demand to see Cassie's phone. As we watch them argue in front of the wife who told her husband about Cassie's OnlyFans, we see Nate promises to getting the flowers as long as she deletes her account, and without any pushback, she deletes it, and she couldn't be happier to get her $50,000 worth of flowers at her wedding. Now in bed, Nate expresses that he hopes their relationship will be different from how he was raised in a house full of secrets, as he wants to be honest with each other. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you're sitting here lying about the money issues you have. She's sitting here lying about wanting to be online and getting attention online. We can see that they're building a future of pure insecurities and lies. Now, in the name of honesty, we see Cassie tells Nate that Maddie, or as he calls it, his Maddie, are friends again and that she is helping her out. Nate wonders what Maddie's end goal is, but Cassie didn't see it other than friends reunited, and she tells her husband-to-be that Maddie is coming to their wedding. Now, back at Lori's, we see while Wayne and Faye are having sex. By the way, the tattoo on his chest and the flag on his wall shows that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree for both Harley and Wayne, being racist pieces of what's falling on the floor upstairs. Wayne, Harley, and Lori find a pig dropping shit on the floor. They eventually get the pig out, but they learn it was Alamo who let the pig in the house for payback for calling him a pig earlier in the episode. Now, to me, having a pig be in the living room was more of a prank more than it was like an actual serious threat, but I do imagine this being like the beginning of like actual beef between Lori and Alamo, and I would imagine that things will be more than a prank and there will be serious consequential situations going on between the two. Now, as we end this week's episode, we see a familiar face and two ex-lovers being reunited, and that's Jules coming home and finding Rue waiting for her. Again, I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but Labra's score was sorely missed in this scene because we all know what score should have been playing in the background when we see these two in the elevator. Now, meanwhile, inside Jules' new high-end apartment, her lifestyle has granted her this new way of living, but the question is, it makes you wonder at what cost. Rue kind of lets her in on what she's been up to with working, but also letting her know that she's California sober. Now, they talk about nostalgia and their past experiences together, as Jules says that her boyfriend wouldn't approve of this random meetup. Now, Rue says, without actually saying, that she's aware of how Jules is living in her place because of her occupation, and how this so-called boyfriend of hers is living a double life, very similar to Jules' past with Cal. Now, Rue flirts with Jules, but Jules isn't playing this game like things are the same between them, but looks like things haven't changed much as Jules invites Rue to join her in the shower, and Rue gets up immediately and gets exactly what she came here for from Jules, and that is pleasure in the form of escaping her pain and her reality, just like old times. Open up this week's episode to learn what led Jules finding her winter opportunity and becoming a sugar baby. It all began with her art school roommate by the name of Vivian, who introduced Jules to becoming a sugar baby. Vivian made it sound like easy money, but we know nothing in Euphoria is ever just easy because more times than not, they end up losing a part of who they actually are. Also, for my movie fans out there, I'm going to quiz you all in the comments right now. What very popular movie from the 90s had its main character's name as Vivian and maybe was the inspiration for Jules' story in this season? From here, we watch as Jules first met a 48-year-old lawyer by the name of Rick, whose therapist told him that he had severe intimacy issues, which is what led him into this particular situation. We see Rick pays Jules a good amount of money just for joining him for dinner, but he offers her more if she'll join him back at his place to indulge in his particular fetish. And that fetish, ladies and gentlemen, is Rick licking her nylons while he pleasures himself. as Jewel quickly realizes that all it'll take is to see Rick a couple times a month and he'll pay her rent completely. But Jules isn't interested in just covering rent, she wants more. Jules would later extend her client's roster, and we're talking about a Hollywood producer, a finance bro, but then in comes Ellis, the plastic surgeon who would change her life. During their first date, if you want to call it that, they discuss the idea of people changing themselves over time, which leads him to bringing up and being so interested in talking about Jules' decision into transitioning when she was 14.
I do what God didn't. Same with you.
That's one way to put it.
Well, is there another? We defy the natural order of things. Age, gravity.
Sex.
Exactly. No fun to be helpless.
To not evolve.
As we learned last week, Ellis has a family of his own, and according to him, his wife is well aware of his behaviors, or as he calls them, weaknesses. Seeing them together, I couldn't help but to think, is Jules just reliving her trauma with Cal? Again, being involved with an older man who's also living a double life, but this time around, she's now older and she's the one holding the cards, or at least that's what she thinks. As time went by, we see Jules would eventually leave her art school behind, as she would go on to make more money than she can ever imagine, as Ellis became her sole source of income and would be her only client. Now, I couldn't help but to notice her roommate Vivian listening into her conversation with her dad about leaving school. It almost felt like she wanted this all to happen for Jules to go into this lifestyle of being this sugar baby, or maybe there is something more insidious or more sinister about Vivian having her go to this lifestyle. I am really curious to know why they chose to show us her hearing this conversation going on. Now we watch as Ellis and Jules indulge in one of Ellis's behavioral activities as he wraps her from head to toe in saran wrap with only her mouth open for her to breathe, as he's made her into his perfect piece of art. Now in this breakdown, we'll be talking a lot about foreshadowing, a lot of symbolism in this episode, and this being one of them. Could seeing Jules wrap like this be symbolic of her literally being wrapped up in this almost Pretty Woman fairy tale type of lifestyle? Now, similar to last week, I got a lot of thoughts and questions about this opening scene, which I actually thought was really interesting. First off, how important will Ellis be to Jules this season, and how long until Ellis's wife gets involved? We know that she is quote-unquote aware of his weaknesses, but that feels like more of a one-sided story, so I do wonder if his wife really does approve of his lifestyle. Second is logistical questions, like how does a sugar baby actually build a roster like this? Is it referral based? Is it an app that they use? Or does she have a boss that sets up her meetings? And finally, do you all think that Jules is actually happy? I mean, she looks like she's in control, right? But then you think about it, wrapping yourself in plastic for a man who treats you like a mannequin is a far cry from the girl that we last saw in season 2. We all know that Jules wants to escape her past, but is she just building a more unstable future? Now, as far as the scene itself, as far as the production of it all, I thought it was shot really well, but I also will say for the first time this season, I thought Hans Zimmer's score really fit into the scene. It kind of felt like this royal princess meeting her sugar daddy, Prince Charming. Now, as far as Jules is concerned, she has always been one of my favorite characters in the show. Despite her character feeling a bit lost at the end of season 2 for me, with everything going on with the love triangle between her, Rue, and Elliot, I've always found her story to be one of the most compelling, as she spends so much time looking for validation in people who can't give it to her. Going back to when we first met Jules in season 1 and getting her backstory and seeing how she dealt with depression and anxiety, which eventually led her mother to taking her to the hospital against her will at the age of 11, I've always had this feeling of like comforting her and wanting her to find happiness, even if that meant removing herself from someone like Rue. As we all know, her choices romantically haven't always been the best for her. It's been like this toxic cycle between, again, Rue and Cal and Nate and Anna and Elliot, all examples of relationships that come from a place of self-doubt and self-discovery, which has led her to the person that we see in this opening scene. Now again, I wonder, is this newfound independence actually growth for Jules? Or is this just the latest iteration of her self-destructive tendencies? So I really did love this opening scene, similar to last week's with Maddie, which it tells a story about what's going on with these characters, but also sets the tone and the theme for the episode. Thinking about this pattern so far, Cassie with her OnlyFans, Rue had her dealings with Alamo, Maddie has her own side hustles. So far this season seems to be obsessed with the idea of how these young people are selling pieces of themselves to survive or to just simply be seen. It seems to be the central theme of the season so far, again, trading your autonomy for a sense of power. Now, back at the Silver Slipper, we see that Rosalia, who I got named wrong last week, but we see that her neck brace isn't a boner killer as she performs on stage for a client. But while the stage is hot, the real action is in the back for a transaction. It's here we see Rue's promotion after dropping off Angel at the suspicious rehab center, as she is now an arms dealer for Alamo, moving weapons headed down to Mexico.
You lost your mind because I'll help you find it.
Rue has become the employee of the month for Alamo, as she's making 3% commission off the sales of the weapons, but the vibe gets a little weird when she tells Alamo that she's just doing this work so she can work her way up to doing something legit. I found this conversation to be so fascinating because Alamo shuts her down by blurring the lines between what's legal and illegal. In his world, it's all just power and money. If you're making bank, what's to complain about? It's important to see how this conversation is structured to make Rue think that what she's doing is legit.
Do you have a moral problem with what you're doing?
What? No, I'm cool. I'm cool.
I look at someone like Rue or Jules or Nate or Cassie and how these characters don't have a problem morally about their actions. Instead, they just have rationalized them. We talked about it last week. It's a fake it till you make it type of mindset, and as we'll see later, the actions of some of these characters will finally catch up to them. Now, this business conversation gets cut short when Lori and Harley finally get their revenge for last week. As we watch them release a pig inside the club, chaos is unleashed and Alamo ends up shooting the pig and killing it. Alamo wants to hit Lori where it hurts as he asks Rue for her weaknesses. Rue tells him about her pet bird, Paladin, who's named after Richard Boone's character from the popular TV show from the 50s by the name of Have Gun Will Travel. It's now the next day and we see that after their shower, Rue and Jules are now hanging out again as Rue invites Jules to Nate and Cassie's wedding as her +1. Now, who else thought it was interesting to see the look on Rue's face, this look of concern as she walks through Jules' bathroom. She saw what looked to be a sex toy, but also some coke above her bath. To me, it was just funny to see Rue having this look on her face and considering her line, pun intended, of work dealing of drugs and weapons, yet she's worried about Jules. Now, speaking of Jules, she hasn't seen Nate or Cassie since graduation and isn't sure they want to see her, but Rue pulls out some cash. She looks at Jules and tells her that she's going to be her sugar daddy now as she gives her the money and tells her to wear something sexy to the wedding. Which, speaking of wedding, we all know that HBO knows how to celebrate new marriage, so let's go ahead and break down this insane green wedding. First off, we have Maddie. She shows up in an all green outfit and it look kind of similar as far as the color goes because it's the same color she wore during Lexi's play when she beat Cassie's ass. The level of I'm here for the drama was off the charts, and later we see just how surprised Nate's parents are to see that Maddie is at their wedding. Now, speaking of Nate, we see him in the bathroom throwing up while ignoring calls from Nas as Cassie's panicking because Nate didn't come home the night before their wedding. Now, I'm assuming that Nate was sick because of whatever shenanigans he did for his bachelor party, but we never do find out exactly what made him sick, besides assuming that he was either nervous about the wedding or not having paid Nas yet, or maybe a combination of both. Now, for the first time this season, we have almost the entire main cast in one scene. As Rue and Jules walk down the aisle, Jules and Cal make eye contact, and we know they have a shared history, and we'll be discussing their conversation a little bit later. Also, I gotta mention a couple things here in this scene. First off, we gotta talk about Jules and this dress that she wore to this wedding. It is very high fashion, but also extremely revealing for a wedding, but shout out to Jules. But also, while watching this scene and seeing Cal's wife, Masha, I am shocked that she stood by his side after everything that we know that he went through and what he did, but also finding out later that she knows about his secret life. So to me, that was wild to see that they are still together. At least that was the vibe I got, that they were still married. And it is the type of ride or die energy that I don't think I'll ever understand, how someone can stay with their husband after everything that Cal has went through. Now, as Cassie prepares to walk down the aisle, her mom gives her some motherly advice about marriage that was basically a horror story.
There I was, never realizing it was the last happy moment I'd shared with your father. God, I look so beautiful. before I started looking like an anorexic witch. And as I marched down the aisle, like we're doing now, it never occurred to me the brutality of the man that I never knew before. It's like, how could I be so naive?
You can get the sense that Cassie is getting the feeling that maybe she is doing the wrong thing, but she's come way too far to stop now. Now, quick side note here, did the show just answer one of the biggest unanswered questions that we've ever had for this series? If we take a look at Nate and his groomsmen, obviously we know that one of them is his brother, but then we have these other two guys, and I'm starting to think to myself, is one of these dudes his brother that was in the family photo from season 1? Or are they simply just like maybe friends of Nate from college, or maybe just his cousins? But let me know in the comments below. Are one of these two guys the mystery third brother that we've been talking about since the very beginning of this show? Now, despite the OnlyFans drama, the $50,000 worth of flowers, and the Maddie of it all, we see that Nate and Cassie officially are married. But while the wedding is happening, a storm is coming. Back at Lori's, Harley is losing it because his son is apparently in love with Faye. But Lori's more focused about the business of it all as she gets a call from Alamo about Rue doing a pickup. Now we watch as they make a plan for Rue to do the drop off, but once she does that, they want to kidnap her immediately after. Now Rue gets the call that she has to do this drop off in the middle of the wedding, and she tells herself that she has a bad feeling about this. She should have listened to her gut, but she's an employee now, so she can't say no. She leaves the wedding, leaving Jules behind with Lexi and Maddie, and seeing Rue walk away from the group felt like a huge piece of foreshadowing in my eyes. Was that a sign that Rue won't be making it out of this season alive? As we know, she's playing this game with people much more dangerous than she thinks, and it could lead her down a path of no return. Now at the reception, we get the most random return of a character that's been around since season 1, and that is BB, who is now pregnant. Now once BB returned, I immediately thought, oh, we are about to get a cameo fest. We're about to see McKay come back, maybe even Ethan might pop up, but I'm kind of being funny about those two. I did not anticipate them coming, but I did secretly think, and I was hoping that maybe, and I know Barbie Ferreira has spoken publicly about her decision about leaving the show, but deep down, I was still kind of hoping that she might pop up for a cameo. It's now time for the wedding speeches, and Kyle's up first as Nate has his brother nearby just in case Kyle says something out of line, but luckily he kept it clean by sharing his love for his son Nate. Now at the bar, we watch as Jules goes over to speak to Kyle about their past. Now this was a conversation I think we were all waiting for as she brings up the tape that Kyle made of them together and how she thought that when he got arrested, she would be called by the police. But Kyle reveals that he was actually taken in for another video entirely and got off because the guy lied about his age. We get more of an understanding about why Kyle's not currently in prison because of a plea deal that he made, and even after all that, Kyle chose to keep in touch with Nate despite him being the one that called the police on him. This whole discussion to me really kind of drives home the core themes of the episode about the blurred lines these characters walk between about what's legal and what's illegal. Now, Jules mentions Kyle's taste in the youth, but as he spins it, he calls it legal, right? Because they're above age or they're right at the age limit. And again, this is just another example of a character rationalizing things to suit their narrative and their actions, as we see Jules shares that sometimes she prefers her romantic partners to be older than her, largely because of their perspective in life. It's not an endorsement, but it adds another layer of their own complex identity and desires, showing how these characters, in their own ways, are searching for connection and sometimes is in problematic places. Now, by the end of this conversation, we get a sense that Jules has this moment of closure with Kyle as they say their goodbyes. Now back to the speeches, and it's now Nate's mom turn as she talks about what it's like to be a mom of boys and how they sometimes bring home the wrong girl. As she says this, her eyes dart straight to Maddie as she talks about how happy she is for Nate that he found Cassie. I'm not gonna lie, I felt bad for Maddie in this situation, and we'll talk about her here in a second, but I couldn't help but to think of one of my favorite scenes, and I can understand where the wife is coming from, because I think about this scene from season 1 of Euphoria.
I'm not supposed to be here right now because I'm dressed like a hooker and none of you like me.
Now going back to Maddie, we see her looking at Cassie and Cassie looks back at her, and you get the impression that maybe Maddie wishes that she was marrying her high school sweetheart instead, but little does she know, breaking things off with Nate all those years ago in high school was actually a blessing in disguise, because as we're going to be talking about later, being with Nate is a literal nightmare, so she 1000% dodged a huge bullet. Now, speaking of nightmares and terrible timing, we see Nas throws a curveball that absolutely broke the wedding's reception's carefully constructed facade. He brings up how Nate owes him and others money as he leaves Nate with a threat.
No, I'm gonna become his worst freaking nightmare.
Now, Cassie's neighbor Heather goes straight to her husband and tells him what just happened and that they gave Nate a ton of money. At first, I'm thinking to myself, damn, this girl is nosy as hell, but then I thought about it more. She's clearly concerned that, number one, they won't be getting their money back anytime soon from Nate, but number two, and probably more importantly, she's probably thinking that Niles will come after them next if Nate isn't able to pay off his debts. Now, this next part here is probably my favorite acting moment of this episode. As Lexi checks in on her sister Cassie, who's got the most horrific look on her face, straight out of a horror movie, as she tries to keep it all together and not cry her eyes out.
Of course. It's my wedding day.
Now look, I know people have their reasons for hating Sydney Sweeney, and honestly, she doesn't always make it easy to ignore the things she said or done in the past off camera. But I do think that some of her off-camera stuff overshadows the fact that, in my humble opinion, she's actually a really decent actress when you're giving her good material. That scene of her holding back her tears and holding it all inside, desperately trying to keep up appearances, was a brilliant moment as far as acting is concerned for me. Like, I thought that was like such a well-constructed scene, and you can just tell the doubts about marrying Nate are just like screaming out of her, and she's realizing it was a huge mistake because she really doesn't know who she married. Now, at their wedding dance, pretending like everything's okay, Nate says to Cassie that they might have to downsize a little as she's again is freaking out. But again, they're now both keeping the fake smiles plastered on their faces as we see Maddie has seen enough and she ultimately leaves the wedding. Again, watching Cassie try not to break and to show how scared she is and Nate keeping his face on at the same time was hilarious during this whole sequence to me. Now, meanwhile, Nate makes up this elaborate story to his neighbor Fred about how some rare flower is causing the development project to pause, and Fred is actually taking the bait. But Heather, on the other hand, not as nearly as gullible as her husband, confronts Cassie directly. She says it all makes sense and she's referring to the OnlyFans because Nate's broke. This was another funny scene because it was cut perfectly with Fred being convinced about Nate's lie, but we also learned from Heather that they invested their kids' college funds, which is an idiot idea. I don't feel bad for them because who in the world does that? But I thought it was just so funny, and this is why I don't feel bad for Cassie overall, because she looks at this woman, at her quote-unquote friend Heather, learning that she just gave money that can't help their kids to Nate, and Cassie's looking at her like she could care less.
And what does that have to do with me?
But now outside, we get another reunion, and it's between Nate and Jules. Now, we all remember just how messed up their story was back in season 1. Now, rumor has it that we were supposed to have a much larger storyline between these two characters, like Jules was supposed to be the Cassie in season 2, but apparently there was some behind-the-scenes drama between Hunter Schafer and Jacob Elorge that prevented that from happening. Now, I do wish the scene was longer between the two characters considering their past, but something tells me this won't be their last scene that they'll be sharing together this season because, again, there's just too much history between the two characters. Now, back inside, the drama continues to escalate as Cassie finally snaps at Nate. She lays into him, saying that he's not a real man because he can't provide and he lied about who he is and about conning all their neighbors. As Nate tries to calm down his wife, Cassie, in a moment of pure unleashed rage, pops the champagne cork right at his head. Now, I know a lot of people feel like these characters aren't themselves from season 1 and 2, and I've just always said, well, I don't anticipate them being the exact same because they were in high school, but now they're adults, so I would hope that they would change as characters. But with that being said, I think we can all agree that in this scene, we got the return of crazy Cassie. I think about that scene in the bathroom in season 2 when she told Nate how crazy she was.
You don't understand, Nate is I am crazier.
We saw those crazy eyes in this scene with the champagne cork, but also I think it's pretty safe to assume that the lying and the manipulative Nate is also back as well. So I do think the first 2 episodes, again, it was all a facade, it was all an act, but these characters and their real personalities are starting to come back. Now, in the back of the limousine, we see Nate apologizing for lying and immediately starts promising Cassie that he's going to make everything better again and how much he loves her as they kiss and make up. And just like that, the cycle of the liar and manipulator is back in full force. Meanwhile, we see Maddie making her way back home alone, and I can almost guarantee that she's got plans cooking, probably focusing all of her energy on breaking up Nate and Cassie. Now, while all of this was happening, back with Rue on her way to Lori's, she gets a call from prison, and it's Fez. Now, the creator of the show, Sam Levinson, has said that the reason that they want to keep Fez alive is because he wasn't able to make it in real life, so they want to honor him by keeping his character alive in the show. But I also feel like them keeping Fez alive also supports the story narratively. I feel like this scene in particular was another level of foreshadowing that Rue is headed for the same fate, that being prison, or maybe even worse, and that being death. Now, Rue and Bishop arrive to Lori's house, and you can feel the tension in the air as they walk towards the door, and they're greeted by Wayne holding a shotgun to their head. Now, Bishop gives Wayne his gun as they walk in, and Bishop shares Alamo's message that if they want to continue business together, they'll have to do quality control, and everything moving forward would have to be tested first. Now, as they're testing the drug, and Lori's trying to convince Rue to come back into the fold, we see Bishop puts a drug in Lori's bird's water. Now, Bishop tosses them the money like a bullet out of a gun, like a scene straight out of Have Gun Will Travel, as he claims to be a cowboy, and him and Rue ultimately leave. Again, speaking about foreshadowing, this scene to me kind of foreshadowed that we can probably anticipate some level of a shootout between Lori's crew and Alamo's crew at some point this season. Now, we end back at Cassie and Nate's house, and they find Nas in the living room, and he brought some muscle with him as he punches Nate and tosses Cassie on the floor as he hits her face and she starts to bleed. Cassie's screaming because, again, she's bleeding from her face, and in the background, we see Nate is getting his ass beat, very similar to what happened to him in the season 2 premiere when Fez hit him over the head with that bottle and started beating his ass as well. Nate is being dragged around like a rag doll as he's brought into the living room all bloodied up, and we see his shoe be taken off as Nas cuts off his pinky toe. As they leave with Nate screaming in pain as Cassie looks at him in complete shock. So yeah, how exactly will Nate lie his way out of this situation? It wouldn't surprise me if we see him wanting to get Cassie back on OnlyFans to make some money as soon as possible. Now, we've seen some pretty shocking shit in this show. Like, we've seen people being assaulted. We've seen, obviously, Nate beating up that guy in season 1. I think about, obviously, when Ashtray was shot, a kid's death is pretty shocking. But as far as, like, I didn't anticipate for Nate to lose his pinky toe 3 episodes into the season. Like, that was a pretty well-crafted scene. Like, I felt the fear and the tension in that scene. Like, that was a well-put-together scene. But again, I don't know what Nate does from here because we see that Nas is not playing around. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, we see that Jules notices that Ellis is back home, and we see that she flips the switch. She fixes her makeup, she adjusts her posture, and she walks into character. That right there, again, is the thesis of this episode. Everyone is performing. Jules is playing the rich person who's figured out the life hack and using her body to do so to get money. Nate is playing the fake businessman, and Rue is playing Grand Theft Auto. They're all just terrified of being seen for who they actually are underneath the layers of the trauma. And again, this is all just one big performance running away from their fears. Now, as we end with our final scenes, we have Rue in the car listening to the Bible, looking for some type of structure in her very unholy life right now, as the red and blue lights go off behind her. The DEA moves in on her as the law is finally catching up to the mess that she's made. As I said last week, I thought it was going to be the FBI, but as we find out, it was the DEA that was telling her in last week's episode, and now it seems her performance is coming to an end. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if we will see Rue becoming an informant to take down both Lori and Alamo's operations from within. Remember that rat crawling underneath the table in episode 1? Again, I had theorized that maybe Rue will become a rat and will end up snitching on Lori. It looks like that might come true. Now, speaking of Lori, back at her place, we see her bird dies after consuming that poison given to it by Bishop, and it just adds more fuel to the war between Lori and Alamo. We pick up right where the chaos left off as Rue is in the back of a DEA car. We can see it in her eyes as she's trying to come up with a lie. The agents are looking at her car and Rue insists that it is clean. She's staring right at them, swearing up and down, but we know Rue. She's addicted to lying. It's like a reflex now. She doesn't even realize she's doing it until the words are already out of her mouth. But then the K9 finds something in the trunk and she gets processed. Now during the interrogation, they build up to only have found a little bit of weed. At least that's how they start this conversation. They begin to lean on her, asking her about her day at the wedding, but then eventually they ask about Lori. But Rue being Rue tries to play dumb, claiming to barely knowing Lori, and when Mexico's brought up, she acts as though she's never heard of Mexico, let alone has ever been there. But we know that's a lie, and they prove she's lying by showing a picture of Rue in Mexico meeting with a member of a cartel. Now this isn't just a simple possession charge anymore. Lying to federal agents is a 5-year ticket to a federal prison. Rue's already in trouble even without spilling the beans on her true relationship with Lori.
This is 20 years in federal prison.
And federal inmates don't get parole.
We know who you work for and what you've been doing.
We know the fentanyl you've trafficked has killed people. For each death we can link to you, it's an additional 20 years.
Yeah, things are not looking good for our girl Rue. Looks like all those actions have finally caught up to her and she's finally facing some serious consequences. As I predicted in my trailer breakdown last week, Rue is given 2 options: go to federal prison or become an informant. Now from here they switch out the actual drugs that they found on Rue and they replace them with sugar pills and laxatives. They tell Rue to lay low until further instructions.
If you want to turn a curse into a blessing, I would say this is your opportunity.
Now it's important to note that Alamo wasn't mentioned once in that interrogation scene. All they seem to be focused on is Rue's connection with Lori, at least for now. Now we see them put an app on Rue's phone that acts as a bug that allows them to record any valuable information that's going to help their case, and the name is under Rue's mom's phone. Now back at the Silver Slipper, Rue has to play it cool and put a smile on for Alamo, who cryptically explains their relationship with Lori is now officially over. Now this week's episode title is mentioned here, that being Kitty Likes to Dance, as we meet a new dancer by the name of Kitty from Kansas, who's Angel's replacement. As we see how Alamo officially inducts a new dancer by taking them to the back and having them show him their best moves. Meanwhile, Rue hands over the fake drugs to Eddie, and again, she has to keep her poker face on and act normal. Now, the theme early on within these scenes isn't just about drugs, it's about the cost of freedom. Rue is now serving as a double agent and a ghost in her own life. She's now traded her addiction for substances for an addiction to survival, and as I've said at the start of this season, I don't know if she's gonna make it out of this in one piece. Now checking in with our favorite toxic newlyweds, Nate and Cassie. Nate was able to reattach his toe and he sees it as a metaphor. He tells Cassie that when you break something, you have to pick up the pieces. To him, the toe represents their relationship. He's broken, she's broken, but he thinks that they just need to stitch it back together and keep it moving. Now that the truth about Nate's finances and his scamming business was put on Front Street last week, we see Cassie calls him out for everything he built being a lie, including their relationship. Now Nate reveals that he owes Naz about $1 million in debt, but he wants Cassie to relax and have faith in him that he'll fix things, but Cassie's at the point where she realizes that their fairy tale is over. As she finishes cleaning his wounds and walks away, Cassie called the one person that she knew can help her in this situation, and that person is Maddie. Now we see Cassie packs her bags and she says that she's ready to work. Now I see Cassie wanting to do this obviously for herself, but also doing this for her husband in a relationship as well. Remember Cassie's past from her backstory from season 1. It showed us her relationship with her dad and how it's not so easy for her to give up on the men in her life, so I feel like she's willing to fight for this relationship despite all the red flags. Now in order to get things going, Maddie takes Cassie to a salon to completely change her look.
It's to take her from the suburbs to the city.
Cool. Again, looking at her history, she's likely doing this to become a version of the woman that can help Nate fix his mess. Now back at Jules, she gets a call from Lexi as she offers Jules what could have been a massive career-defining opportunity. Jules is tasked with recreating George's Seurat's Sunday at a Park for Patty's show LA Nights, as millions of eyes would be seeing her art for the first time. Now this brings us to a major theme of this episode. The parallels between Maddie and Lexi helping Cassie and Jules. Now on the surface, as we know, Maddie and Lexi look like they've made it in Hollywood. But as we know, Maddie is still struggling financially and Lexi seems to only be focused on work and has zero personal life. But then you look at Jules and Cassie. From the outside, Jules appears to have all her dreams come true, but it comes at a cost for being bought. Then you have Cassie, having her wedding and her dream guy, but we know that none of that is entirely true. Again, this is an example of characters who appear to be in a good spot, but looks are definitely deceiving. Now, Jules completes the piece, and let's just say it doesn't quite fit the look that they were going for, as she decides to give them her full artistic expression. And that expression includes about 14 penises, which isn't what Patty and her production team wanted. Now they bring Jules in, and for some reason, Lexi brings up Jules being trans as her possible reason for her artistic decision, which to me felt odd and out of place and out of pocket for Lexi to say, but the real issue stems from that the network has censorship, which is understandable in my opinion. Now they suggest adding more clothes and even adding bread to fit the theme, as Jules says it'll take a couple hours to make those changes, but ultimately they decide to push a scene back to the following week. Now, this mishap will cost the studio about $56,000 in shooting time, but in reality, it's about a $191,000 loss. We know Lexi has been known to play by the book, and we can see how this situation has definitely gotten to her. Now, back to Jules. She takes the notes, covers up the whole thing in red and orange paint, and draws one large penis in the center of the piece and just walks away. Now, look, I said it last week. I'm a big fan of Jules, but I even have to admit that this felt reckless. I don't know, man. I just feel like Jules was out of pocket. Like, she knew, obviously, Lexi brought her in for this opportunity. And then for her to kind of do like a screw you to the studio, knowing that this could cost Lexi her entire career if she makes another mistake, just felt so like odd to me. And I just don't know where Jules is coming from. I'm really trying to wrap my mind around why Jules did that. Was it like artistic integrity, or was it self-sabotage, which we've seen Jules do in the past? But this time around, again, where is this stemming from? Does it have anything to do with her new relationship with Ellis, or now being in contact again with Rue? Does she feel like she can't fully express herself in the situation without compromising herself? Or is it something else entirely? Again, I normally stand behind my girls Jules, but not this time around. So let me know in the comments below, what do you all think Jules' intentions were with that scene? Meanwhile, with the Dollar Tree hustle and flow crew of Lori's, we see her bury her bird as Wayne and Harley discuss payback against Alamo. Now during this, Rue was given orders to set up a new transaction between Alamo and Lori, but clearly after the pigs and now a dead bird, the task is damn near impossible to Rue to make happen. Now, obviously knowing this, Rue suggests that she get a new dealer involved instead of Lori. So to clarify from what I was talking about earlier, it's clear that Alamo is actually on their radar as well. So the DEA see it as like they're killing two birds with one stone, with having Rue taking both operations down. Now we see that Cassie is staying with Lexi for a bit as she's taking new photos of herself. Now obviously Lexi isn't on board with her sister commodifying her own body online, as Maddie defends the grind, citing Bad Baby as the golden standard for online profit.
Gucci flip-flops, fuck it, hit your bitch and massage.
Now this next scene I found to be very interesting. I know there's been a lot of online rumors about the off-screen beef between Zendaya and Sydney Sweeney, and because of that, Zendaya refused to be in scenes with her for this season. Now if the rumor is to be true, well, either this scene was heavily edited to make it seem like they were in the same area, or they just made it happen. As we see while Cassie's taking pictures of herself, we see Rue is just a few inches away from her and she asks Maddie to help her find some drugs, not for her, but for her boss, which is roping Maddie into her situation.
What is wrong with you people? You're looking for drugs, you're selling your body on your porn site, and you're like some internet pimp? God, and it's pathetic. And it's really disturbing.
Now we end up seeing Cassie ends up pawning off her wedding ring in order for her to buy her own spot in the same complex as Lexi, as she completes her pursuits of fame and fortune masked as independence. Now to backtrack a little bit, even though we saw Maddie saying that she didn't feel comfortable helping Rue get drugs, I do wonder if Rue will eventually convince her, and again, getting Maddie roped into her madness. Now, if the online photos that leaked online a couple weeks ago are true, we are going to be seeing Maddie being introduced to someone that is working closely with Rue, and things are about to get really interesting. Now, during all this, let's catch up with Nate. He's at the zoning commission fighting for his life to get this retirement community project approved. He's on his last leg, and in an odd move, Nate recites a Bible verse trying to frame his development as a holy mission. But as he's denied, he won't walk away. Nate begins to break down and calls out one of the members by the name of Bill, and he embarrasses himself by offering to beg and plead on his knees. Now, for those who's been questioning, who is this man? This isn't the Nate of old. Well, we finally know why he's been acting this way in the last few weeks. He screams that he's trying to do something good to wash away his sins of his past. He's desperate to prove that he isn't the monster everyone knows him to be, and this development project for the elderly is a good thing for them and the world, and he cannot be bad. But that doesn't work, as the motion remains to be denied as Nate cries his trying to do good eyes out. Now let's talk about Mr. Nate the Snake. My question is, I want to know in the comments below, do you all think he was lying? Again, this episode thrives on the lies of the season. Every character thinks they've changed. Cassie thinks her online brand is empowerment. Nate thinks a retirement home can erase his history of violence. Ruth thinks she can navigate the underworld without falling back into the abyss. But they're all just masking deep-seated issues with temporary materialistic fixes. They're buying their way into lives that don't actually exist. They're running towards fame and good deeds to avoid the internal work. They've changed the packaging, but the context under the hood remains just as broken. So to bring it back to Nate, again, do you all feel he's actually seeking redemption, or is he just looking for a new way to navigate his narrative? Now back with Rue, who's playing a card game in Alamo's as she's recording the conversation about finding a new dealer. Now, Alamo isn't focused on the cards, but he senses something's off. He can see that Rue is sweating, trying to maintain a poker face, but Alamo flips the script. He calls her a rat in front of everyone, but not in the snitching sense, but in the sense that he knows that she's using again. He warns Rue that her using hard drugs again is a death sentence, but we see Rue wins the game and she beats Bishop. Now, was Rue's poker face actually working, or is this victory just a foreshadowing of her inevitable fall? Now, there was a lot of fun subtext within this scene, but again, I feel like Alamo's warning about her death seems very important to what may come of Rue at some point this season. Now, it's been a few weeks since we last saw Angel, and it appears that was the last time we saw her. According to Magic, Angel ran away from rehab and she's disappeared, which is code for Alamo took care of the problem. Now, Kitty has officially replaced her, and the clock is ticking for Rue to find a new source to replace Lori. Now, back with Maddie and Cassie, who's now wearing her best outfit for this mega influencer party by the name of Brandon. Now, Cassie's mission is crystal clear. Snag a video with Brandon for his massive following. But Maddie makes things very clear to not cross this line. Use your body to get his attention, but don't give your body to him. Cross that line and she loses her strategic advantage and the entire point of using him. Now, what caught my attention here was how Cassie's journey at this party was cut in between the scenes of the new dancer Kitty, who is currently in a private dancing room surrounded by a room full of men. Maddie and Alamo have made it clear to making money off men by any means necessary, which is echoed through both narratives. We watch these two women essentially selling versions of themselves to these men. Cassie with her calculated allure dancing with another girl to grab Brandon's eye, while Kitty, as the title suggests, Kitty likes to dance, comes full circle in this moment as she endures a train being ran on her, all while Rue observes on the monitor. This was a brutal parallel, and it served as a powerful commentary on expectation in different forms. Both are performing, both are seeking attention and validation, and both are under pressure to deliver in different ways. Now, I thought that we saw the last of this particular character, but surprise, surprise, we get the return of Caitlin, who we remember is Maddie's first online client from episode 2. Now, we see Cassie, who's fully committed to this Valley Girl accent and this Valley Girl persona to fit in, as she leaves to go to a quieter area with Caitlin and Brandon to do some drugs. Now, it's here that we get a really funny callback from Maddie as she pulls her season 2 premiere move, which was her banging on the door for Cassie. But this time around, things are much different as she makes sure that Cassie stays in character. Now, we see Cassie offers to do coke on Caitlin's body first. Now, it's clear that both women are here for the same reasons, and they're now one-upping each other as Cassie quickly ups the ante by getting Brandon to snort coke near her kitty cat. Now, we watch this game of tug-of-war of Brandon's attention as Cassie ultimately wins as Caitlin stumbles off to throw up. Now, just as Cassie looks to be giving up her body, we see Maddie finally comes in the room and the mission is accomplished as the video is secured. Cassie has their attention now, and the real challenge begins, which is keeping it. I can't lie, man, seeing Cassie's descent into this calculated manipulation is both thrilling and deeply unsettling at the same time, because in our reality, a lot of creators out there in this world do this exact same thing. Meanwhile, back at the club, Rue is checking on Kitty, helping her clean up and asking her if she's being forced to do what she just did. As Kitty, with a look of detachment, claims that she's good and she likes what she does. Now, out comes Magic out of one of the stalls, and she gives this look that is clear that she and Rue are not friends. Now, Eddie has Rue's phone, and Magic seizes his opportunity and spills the intel by telling him that Rue asked Kitty if she was forced to do what she does for a living, and it's clear that that is a conflict of interest for Rue's job. Now, within all this chaos going on, Rue's mom calls, aka the DEA calls. Now, Rue is forced to answer right in front of Eddie and Magic, and the DEA agents tell her that she's been compromised by Magic and she needs to find a way to discard her. The tension in this scene was captured so well as we see the fighting between Rue and Magic begin. And man, talk about perfect timing. Just as the internal conflict explodes, Wayne and Harley arrive and they have their guns drawn. They burst into Eddie's office, gun to his head, demanding he opens the safe. Now, Eddie hesitates, even though they threaten to kill Rue and Magic, and he still doesn't listen, and he ultimately takes a shot in the stomach. But once they point the gun towards his manly area, we see Eddie breaks, and he ultimately opens the safe, and they get the jackpot they were looking for. As Wayne and Harley grab the money and make their escape with the worst getaway driver of all time. In the aftermath, we end the episode with Rue calling Bishop, and she tells him the whole situation. They try to look for plate numbers, but they aren't there, but we see Magic spots a woman in the front seat of the getaway, and it's Faye. And the moment Bishop hears that, he knows that this wasn't some random robbery. This was clearly Lori getting her revenge for the bird, hitting Alamo where it hurts him the most, and that's his pocket. The episode opens up with a sequence that feels like it was ripped from a fever dream of a nightmare or a very strange fan fiction subreddit as Cassie is living out her dreams. When she was watching Nate getting his ass beat and having his toe cut off and him being broke, this granted Cassie the opportunity to pursue her dreams. We cut, pun intended, to Cassie showing off her feet, dolled up, polished, and she's sucking her own toes for the camera. It's provocative, it's weird, and it works. After mega influencer Brandon tagged her, she gained over 17,000 new subscribers in less than 24 hours. With the barrier now broken, the money started flowing in, but so did the request for Cassie to do anything and everything for attention online. Maddie knows to strike the iron while it's hot as she has Cassie working to the bone. We're talking some crazy ASMR, some provocative photo shoots, her mailing out her lingerie, and request-based content like farting in a jar.
For $700? You fart in the jar. He's not going to know the difference. Okay.
All of this ultimately led to 50,000 new subscribers in no time. Now, Maddie knows the game. In the current landscape of internet, hate is just as good as love. If people are angry, they're watching. If they're watching, they're paying. Now, Maddie gets Cassie more exposure by having her on various podcasts, as we see Cassie doubling down on the controversial treadwife rhetoric, which is arguing that men need to be the sole providers and protectors, explicitly telling Democrats that she's not talking to them.
Hunters and gatherers and protectors. But now they're being forced to walk around on their tippy toes. I mean, it's not natural. Men should be free. They should be able to speak their mind, voice their desires.
Oh, you think they're being too restricted by
Yes.
society?
Like, if a man today were to say that he wants a girlfriend that can cook or clean, he might as well be screaming the N-word.
Now look, let's get real for a second. At this point, it's hard not to look at this and not think that Sam Levinson didn't pull direct inspiration from the public discourse surrounding Sydney Sweeney herself.
Wait, is this a fucking play about us?
To me, this little segment is a meta-commentary on today's stars or influencers that rage bait their way to the top, and in exchange, the audience politicizes them, they objectify them, and then watch them profit from the firestorms. But even with 50,000 subscribers and a million eyes on her, Cassie is still hooked on Nate. Maddie calls Cassie out for wiring Nate $35,000 because he was going to be evicted from their house. Cassie tells Maddie that he's been very supportive of her new career and thinks she's done an amazing job, but as Maddie puts it, Nate's not a breadwinner, he's a bread loser who's definitely taken advantage of his wife, as Maddie points out that if Cassie doesn't be careful, Nate could be entitled to 50% of what she makes. Now it's funny because, as we'll discuss later, Nate isn't the only one taking advantage of Cassie. But then this happened. Now, as Cassie got bigger and bigger, so did the things her fans requested of her. She got so big that she outgrew herself literally, as the show decided to visualize Cassie's growth by literally turning her into a giant walking through the streets of Los Angeles. It's this Godzilla-like Cassie as she's stomping through the streets, towering over the Hollywood sign. Now look, I get the metaphor. It's all about her ego, her influence, and how she's destroying or taking over. But the visual execution to me was one of the most head-scratching, cringy, and straight-up ridiculous scenes of the entire history of this show. And just when I thought that it couldn't get any weirder or worse, we see Cassie finding one of her fans pleasuring himself to one of her videos in his apartment building as she taps the glass and leans her breast against the window while the guy licks the glass and he's in a state of euphoria. I truly couldn't believe what I was watching, and for a minute there, I almost felt myself almost turning off this episode because, again, I couldn't believe what the hell was actually going on my television screen. Look, there's been a lot of shocking things on the show, but this was just straight up stupid to me. In a show that prides itself on being raw and edgy, this scene was just an overreach. This to me was a perfect example of why sometimes a writer like Sam Levinson needs an editor that can just tell him no. There's a line between artistic expression and just throwing ridiculous things on the screen for shock value just to see if it sticks. And again, to me, this was way past the line of stupidity. It was pretty hard to watch. But I have to remind myself, that's Euphoria. It's a show that constantly tries to push the envelope, even when the envelope has clearly been shredded into pieces. We got a lot more to break down, but I need to know from you all in the comments right now, what did you all think about that opening sequence? Am I wrong in thinking that it was like extremely stupid with the metaphor of Cassie being a giant? Or do you all think it was like the best piece of art you've ever seen? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Now, as we cut to Alamo's, where we find him being pissed off at Eddie about how things were handled with the robbery situation. He's looking at Eddie, who, mind you, literally took a bullet during the robbery, and instead of seeing a loyal soldier, he sees a traitor because Eddie opened up the safe. In Alamo's twisted, ego-driven mind, dying for the money was the only acceptable outcome. Now, Alamo and his crew are fully aware that Lori and her crew were behind the robbery, and it's time for them to get their get back. Bishop believes that they have an element of surprise on their side as he has Rue draw up a map of Lori's farm. Now we can clearly see Alamo's on edge as he's taking out his anger on his crew as he attacks Kid after mistakenly giving Alamo some pants that definitely didn't fit him, as Alamo takes this as him saying to him that he thinks he's a little boy.
Who is that guy? Who are you? Huh? Some little, small, pathetic motherfucker. Because that guy ain't me. You ain't me.
He starts slapping Kid around and holds an ice pick to him and makes him piss his pants just to make a point. Now, Rue is watching all this, and you can see the fear in her eyes. She's now witnessing the other side of the man that she initially thought was a cool businessman with a strip club and had some dope-ass parties. But now she sees his other side, the side of him being fragile and insecure and being a straight-up psychopath, and he views everyone as a liability. And with her secretly working for the DEA, Rue has to only imagine what he would do to her if he ever found out. Now, switching gears back to the influencer side of the world, we have Cassie and her new mentor fling thing going on with Brandon. It's clear that they've been sleeping together, and Brandon is doing exactly what guys like him do, and that's isolating this up-and-coming star. He's whispering in Cassie's ear that Maddie isn't a real manager and that she needs to move into the influencer house to really grow her empire, as he tells her to fire Maddie because it's the right business decision. Now, speaking of Maddie, we cut to her at her 9-to-5 job as an assistant as she's tasked with cleaning up dog poop. Now, to make matters worse, her boss brings up that she recently read an article on Caitlyn, who we remember was the girl that Maddie first represented, and how she's now making a fortune, which is what Maddie told her boss all those months ago. If she would have listened to her, they would have been making a fortune off of her. Now, we later find Cassie finding out what Maddie does for a living, and she sets up a meeting for them to talk about moving forward with her being her manager. Now, on the other side of town, we find Nate talking to Cassie about Brandon and encouraging her to making sexy videos with him because it'll make a lot of money. Now, as Nate pitches this idea to his wife of her and Brandon in a hot tub, making it look like they're a couple. Now, Cassie brings up, wouldn't her husband be jealous? Well, he tells her no, because he's a businessman and he sees this as an opportunity for them to take advantage of Brandon, and even Nate encourages her to move in with Brandon because she is his last hope. It is crazy to see Nate literally encouraging his new wife to move in with another whole ass man and sell her body and image because, as he says, she is his last hope to pay off his debts. Now, we can see that this is obviously a con that was orchestrated by Nate and Cassie are working together, or at least Cassie sees it as them working together. But in reality, Nate isn't a supportive husband. He's clearly a failing man using his star-hungry wife as a human ATM machine. Now, again, we talked about it last week. Is this the Nate that everyone was missing? Because this, to me, is definitely a move that old Nate will pull back in season 1 and 2. Again, pimping out his own wife. Now, I don't want to completely dismiss Cassie's part in this whole situation, because I definitely think that she is fully aware of at least some of what's going on in regards to her benefiting from being pimped out by not only her husband, but also Maddie. Now, don't get me wrong, Cassie's an idiot, but I don't think she's fully not aware of what's going on. I think she actually likes the attention going on, and whether it's Cassie, Maddie, or Nate, everyone thinks they're winning, but as we know, this is not going to end well for any of them. Now, to me, this first half of the episode really highlighted the theme of exploitation. Alamo exploits his crew's fear, Brandon exploits Cassie's ambition, and Nate exploits Cassie's entire existence. Again, nobody is winning here, even if they think that they are. Now, back with Rue, Alamo asks to see her alone for the first time since the robbery, but first she's got to hear from Bishop. He shares with her about his thoughts about people being cursed, and he feels that about Rue, and ever since she's been around, things haven't been going good.
I'm saying you got a 666 inscribed on the back of your skull, but something about you gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Now, as Bishop tells Rue to meet Alamo at his bar, we see that he's got the Silver Slipper security guard tied up in the shower, and he's about to torture him, most likely thinking that he has something to do with the robbery, as we later see that this security guard ends up being chopped up in pieces and fed to the pigs. Now, downstairs, Alamo tells Rue that Lori wants to meet, and he thinks that she wants him to surrender and wave the white flag, but Alamo ain't about to roll over his belly like a pig and play monkey to her tune. Now, later that night, we see Rue meets up with the DEA agents who's breathing down her neck to record the meeting with Lori. She tries to call Lori and bait her, but Lori shuts it down immediately after Rue brought up her recently murdered bird. Now, Rue's desperate, so she pivots over to Wayne. Finally, Rue gets a win as Wayne let it slip out that they've already found a new drug mule to replace Rue, and this being just enough for the DEA and what they needed for now. Now, after Cassie learned that Maddie works as an assistant, and before setting up the meeting with her, we see Cassie signing a new manager, most likely someone that's tied to Brandon, as she is ready to dump Maddie. Now, at this meeting at Maddie's apartment, which Maddie lied about where she lived to Cassie, as they both start calling each other out for lying to one another. Now, Cassie tries to tiptoe around the situation as she brings up moving into the influencer house and this being a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but we can see that Maddie can see where this is going a mile away. She tells Cassie to have some balls and just get straight to the point. As Cassie is about to fire her, we see Maddie pulls a great bait and switch. We watch as she pretends to be on the phone about an audition for the LA Knights with the star Dylan, as Cassie immediately forgets what she just told her 5 seconds ago about firing Maddie, and instead she signs a contract created by Maddie without even reading it, as Maddie takes a picture of Cassie next to this contract, and Cassie promises to never let her down again. But here's the thing, Maddie hasn't actually secured their audition for Cassie. We watch as Maddie strong arms Lexi into making this happen after Maddie asks Lexi if she wants to make an enemy out of her. And Lexi knows better, and she ultimately makes the call. Now Cassie shows up to the audition and we watch as she leans into the Lexi Howard sister card when signing in under Howard as her last name and not her newly married last name, as Cassie ends up delivering a monologue from Antony and Cleopatra. And honestly, we see Cassie's pretty good at this, which honestly shouldn't come as a surprise because we know Cassie has lived her whole entire life performing, so it makes total sense that she would be a natural. Now we see Patty and her producer seize her tape and they're hooked on her and they want her to join the LA Knights.
If she can do Shakespeare,
She can do LA Nights.
Yes.
Now back with Rue, she's with Jules, who she hasn't seen since the wedding. Now Jules asks Rue if she's had any other relationships since high school, which we see Rue brings in Angel and that being her last relationship. Now we watch as Rue kind of adds in a particular story about how the relationship went between her and Angel. Most of it was true, but some of it was kind of made up to kind of what I assume was to make Jules a little bit jealous, as Jules can sense that maybe Rue is actually lying about some of it. Now we watch as Jules gets straight to the point and she asks Rue, what does she want out of her? What does she want out of this situation or whatever the situation they have going on, as Jules wants Rue to simply take it and to make Jules hers, which ironically we cut to a scene where Jules is having sex, but not with Rue, but she's having sex with Ellis. Now after they have sex, we see Ellis finds a pair of Rue's underwears and he questions Jules about who she's bringing to his apartment. He lectures her about his family and the risk of STDs, throwing the underwear in her face like trash, as we can see Jules slightly tearing up. This was a moment where I felt that Jules felt the fear of being unseen. I feel like Jules is tired of being someone's secret or being someone's afterthought. She wants to be someone's everything right now, and she's just being treated like a thing to be disregarded. To me, this second half of the episode focused on the theme of manipulation and how everyone is using someone. Whether that's Maddie using Cassie, or the DEA using Rue, or Ellis objectifying Jules, and we'll get a little bit more of that with Nate. Now, Nate wakes up to the notification that Cassie has wired over another $30,000 to him, and we see Nate thinks that he's untouchable right now. He's literally dancing in celebration, feeling like he's in high school again, but he's still late on his payment to Nas. Now in the background, we see one of the goons watching Nate dancing as he ultimately breaks into the house while Nate was in his mid-groove. We watch Nate runs upstairs, lock himself in the bathroom, thinking that this wooden door can stop what's about to happen to him. Now I hope you guys weren't eating during this scene, because not only does Nate get his recently reattached toe ripped off, but then the goon takes his ring finger off as well. Now, while it was gross to watch, there was some symbolism going on in this scene. To me, Nate's power is literally being stripped away limb by limb. He can't run from the situation, and he definitely can't just put a ring on this messy life anymore. To me, he's literally falling apart, and out of all the characters right now, he's taken the most physical damage so far. And in my eyes, karma has definitely caught up to Nate. And y'all remember Tyler from season 1? Yeah, I have a feeling that he's somewhere in the world of Euphoria just smiling right now. Now, before moving on, I do want to highlight that I do feel like when it comes to all the characters, Jules and Nate feel like they're in a different show, but the thing that keeps them connected to me is the themes they have going on, right? Manipulation, control, wanting to be seen. So again, they feel like they're in a different show, but I think thematically, their themes are still tying in to what's going on overall with the show. Meanwhile, over at the club, the walls are closing in on Rue. Magic finds the drugs that Rue forgot that she planted in her locker in last week's episode. Magic takes them straight to Alamo and spills the tea on what really happened, at least from her perspective, during the robbery. Now, Alamo is a predator and he smells blood in the water. He's starting to realize that Rue might have been the one that set up the robbery with Lori. Now cut to Rue and Maddie at a diner talking about Cassie and how Maddie has taken on the belief in equanimity, which is the mental calmness, composure, and evenness on temper, especially in difficult situations. Now they get to talking about the Bible and Jesus, but outside, Rue notices Bishop, and instead of Jesus walking into the diner, in comes Alamo the devil. Man, the tension in this scene was great. This is probably one of my favorite scenes, probably my favorite scene now I think about it of the episode, as Maddie can sense the energy shifted in the room. As Alamo talks about his upbringing and how he knows his employees, you can see he's marking his territory. He tells Rue that her ride is outside, but he stays behind to talk to Maddie as the Rue domino effect begins. They talk about his quality of life, and she shares a little bit of her life and her money issues and how she's splitting time between her day job versus her other job, which is managing OnlyFans. She starts breaking down the economics of OnlyFans, mentioning how the platform made nearly just as much as Hollywood did the year before. Maddie admits that she might not necessarily be a good person and only is worried about making the bag and ain't worrying about getting her hands dirty in the process. Now, when she mentions that Cassie could be a $1 million month earner, we see Alamo's ears perking up. He's looking for a partner with a vision, and Maddie is auditioning for that very role. He takes her to the club to see his roster, and Maddie picks out Magic and Kitty. Maddie is officially in business with the devil, and as I said in the past, I'm such a big fan of the Maddie character, and I truly hope that she is smart enough to survive Alamo. Now we take a detour back to the Howard sisters, where Lexi tells Cassie that she got the role in LA Nights. In Cassie's twisted head, this is her foot in the door of Hollywood. She is one step closer to taking over, or at least that's how she sees it in her head. Now as we come to a close of this episode, back with Rue, things have gone from bad to very bad for her. Bishop takes Rue's phone and they drive out to Alamo's ranch. They hand her a shovel, they make her dig a hole deep enough to reach her throat. Now, as she's done, G, Kid, and Bishop bury Rue up to her neck in the hole that she dug herself. This being a literal metaphor of Rue having spent the last 3 seasons digging a hole of her own lies, her addiction, and her betrayals. Now, she's literally stuck in it. It's now morning, and Alamo is out with his horse talking about love and trust, the two things Rue has completely destroyed in his eyes. We cut back to Rue in a hole, Rue's head sticking out, which is very similar to the movie that she was watching that was in the background playing in episode 1 at Lori's house. But we find Rue finds herself in the most vulnerable and terrified position of her life. Now Alamo on his horse riding towards Rue with club in hand, looking like he's about to knock her head clean off like he similarly did at the end of episode 1 with the gun in the apple. But this time we don't see the outcome as we cut to black. We open this week's episode with a very unexpected backstory about Alamo as a kid. As Rue says, the coldest female he ever knew was his mama. This opening scene possibly reshapes our notions about Alamo as a person. Cut to the great Danielle Deadwaller, who I believe is one of the best actors working today, as she truly embodies Mama Brown for us in this opening scene, which may be my favorite opening scene of the season so far. Now we can see her calculated determination as she's applying her makeup, choosing her outfit, as her mind is clearly set on one thing, and that being providing for her and her son, no matter who gets caught in her web of lies. We can see early on that Mama Brown is looking for stability and for someone to help lift them out of their struggle. And for her, a potential temporary partner isn't a lover, but as we'll find out later, he's a resource. As we watch her prepping little Alamo with instructions on what to say, what not to say, and how to act, she wants to ensure this new man sees a picture of domestic harmony, that Alamo likes him, and vice versa. This all being for her son, who she says is the most important thing to her in the world. It's here we meet the not-so-good-looking man by the name of Preston, as we can see that he's not your typical Prince Charming. He's got scars on his face that immediately tells you that he's been through something. But from the moment he steps in, he's respectful. He shakes young Alamo's hand and looks him right in the eye, just like Mama Brown coached Alamo to expect. And on this initial exchange, you can see that these two are in their own ways trying to impress one another. Preston trying to impress Mama Brown and her son, and little Alamo trying his best to be a good son, trying to impress Preston for his mom. Now we see Preston gifting Alamo a Hershey's chocolate bar, and it's a small gesture, but for a kid at his age, it's a sign that maybe this is someone that he can trust. In this moment, you can see that Alamo senses that this is a good man, a God-fearing man, and a man who, most importantly, clearly has good intentions for his mom. We see them in church as the choir is singing and Preston and Mama Brown are holding hands, and you can see Mama Brown is getting emotional. For a moment, we, like Alamo, believe that she's truly found herself a good man. This paints a perfect picture for a new start for this family in the making. Now we see Preston and Alamo are out enjoying some ice cream and bonding, and you'll notice this guy behind them looking at them, and we will see this same guy again in a little bit. Now this is where Preston opens up and tells Alamo about his past, about an accident at a chemical factory that left him with his scars, as he also shares that he's awaiting a large legal settlement. Now you can see the dreams in his eyes and the genuine desire to build a better life for them all. He talks about getting Alamo into a private school, about making life truly better for Alamo and his mama, and again, you can only imagine what Alamo is thinking at his young age. This isn't just a stepfather situation for him, but maybe someone he can grow to be like one day and someone he can look up to as a hero. Now, as some time goes by, the settlement finally comes in, and Preston, true to his word, showers them with gifts. We see him getting Miss Brown some jewelry, a whole new wardrobe, and some flashy furniture that transforms their apartment into something brand new. It's now summertime and life is good, and it feels like a real fairy tale come true. Preston tells Alamo he plans to propose to his mom, promising to be there for them, unlike Alamo's biological dad. Alamo believes this. He believes in Preston. He believes in his mama's happiness, and he believes in this new secure future. But this is where we are reminded that this is Euphoria, ladies and gentlemen, where good things don't last long and they aren't as they always appear to be. Now, as they return home from a beautiful day at the beach, they find their apartment is completely empty. Everything Preston had bought them, all the symbols of their new hopeful life, was just stolen. But here is where we can see that Mama Brown doesn't react with sadness, but instead she acts like this was meant to be. She calls this a bad omen, and in a flash, she's packing their remaining clothes and prepares to leave. We see Preston crying, begging, and promising he can fix this, but it's too late. We see Miss Brown takes Alamo and leaves him standing there broken, promising to fix something that's unfixable. Cut to a new city, we see Mama Brown as calm as one can be as she tells Alamo that Preston was just simply bad luck. We watch as she freshens up, much like she did at the beginning of this episode, and here is where we get the reveal. She walks into a living room to greet a new man, the same guy that we saw at the ice cream truck watching Preston and Alamo. Mama Brown and this new man planned the entire robbery. She hustled Preston. The bad omen was just an exit strategy, a convenient excuse to cut ties to make off with her share of the things he bought for them, leaving this man broken in so many different ways. The coldest female he ever knew was his mama. Rue's words hit different now, don't they? Because the con wasn't Preston. Preston was the victim. The real con was Alamo. The con was his belief that his mother loved Preston and that she truly was trying to build a family with him and secure a future. He believed in his dream only to see his mother shatter it, revealing her true nature as a calculated hustler. Man, this opening scene was great, and it was just a reminder that when Sam Levinson actually thinks about things, he can still make compelling stories. This opening scene just really explained everything about how he operates today. This betrayal by the woman he loved and trusted most planted a seed of profound mistrust deep down in his soul. He made a promise to himself that day that he would never end up like Preston, vulnerable, emotionally invested, and ultimately outsmarted and left with nothing. And perhaps even more importantly, he promised himself that he would never let a female outsmart him. Let's think about this opening for a second and think about how it correlates to the treatment of women that we've seen from Alamo so far this season. Alamo sees every woman, every relationship as a potential transaction, a potential trap. Love is weakness. Emotion is leverage to be exploited. He doesn't open himself up because opening up means becoming Preston. He can't afford to be naive and believe in good intentions. He sees deception everywhere because his own mother, the source of his safety and love, was the ultimate deceiver. This flashback was the blueprint to Alamo's entire character arc. His inability to truly love or trust women all stemmed from that day where he watched his mom abandon a man who loved them after orchestrating his downfall for profit. He learned that love is a performance and connection is a tool. It shows us that his coldest female didn't just teach him how to be cool, she taught him how to be cold. Before moving on, man, I need to know what you all thought of Alamo's backstory. Did it change your perception on him? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now cut to the present day where we last saw Rue closing her eyes as Alamo rides towards her on his horse with club in hand, ready to hit her in the face, but he doesn't strike. He rides past Rue, a terrifying promise that the violence has only been delayed slightly. Alamo gets off his horse and slowly walks towards Rue to hit her on foot in the face with a club as Rue begs and pleads with him as she says that she knows that the getaway driver was Faye and she promises to get his money that was stolen from him back as he stops from hitting her yet again. Meanwhile, we cut to Faye sampling the stolen fake drugs from Alamo as she's gotten diarrhea from them as she's talking on the phone with Rue, who asks for her to do her a favor. Rue wants Faye to help her get in a picture of the key to open Wayne's safe, which was actually brought up in episode 1 of the season, as she wants this key to break into the safe, promising Faye that she'll be able to get some of the money, but there's one problem. Faye has fallen in love with this Nazi Wayne. We watch as he puts a Nazi cap on her and promises her a better future, that she'll no longer have to be Laurie's mule, and plans on having fair-skinned babies with her as he gives her a Nazi tattoo. Now, despite her loyalty towards Wayne, Rue convinces Faye to helping her by reminding her about what happened with her and Fez back in season 2, as she agrees to taking a picture of the safe's key. That way Alamo can make a duplicate with a 3D printer. Now, before moving on, we actually get a little bit of a glimpse into this toxic relationship between Wayne and Faye, as she has to pretend that she wasn't on the phone with Rue and tries to explain that the drugs that were stolen weren't actually real. But Wayne isn't willing to hear her out because he's too worried about his girl taking drugs and what that would do to their future kids, as they say each other's nicknames while making up, as the plan is set for Laurie and Alamo to meet up. Now, during this, Rue lets the DEA know it's showtime. Wayne and Faye are blowing kisses and hearts at each other as Alamo and his crew load up their guns, and Rue shows him that Faye took the picture of the key as the meeting starts and Laurie's crew arrives. As Rue finds herself in a room full of guns just waiting to go off, Alamo and Laurie discuss business. Laurie brings up one of Alamo's businesses called the Gold Rush Medical Services, where he takes some of his girls to Mexico to get plastic surgery. Laurie wants to use this operation as another way to bring in fentanyl from Mexico and using one of Alamo's girls to do so. Now, if Alamo doesn't want to do business with Laurie, Laurie says that she plans on taking the stolen items she took from him and taking them to the FBI. Now, with the border being shut down soon, the deal for Alamo to have one of his girls get surgery and bringing over 80 kilos worth of drugs, and upon a return, Alamo will get his stuff back all before the border is shut down and everyone leaves happy. Now, they both spit in their hands and they make this deal as Alamo pulls Laurie close in to warn her that he'll put an end to her and her whole operations if she screws him over. Now, if I were to guess, I would bet that Alamo's going to choose either Kitty or Magic to being the one to do this job, as we know that he plans to most likely screw over Laurie and taking the drugs for himself. Now, later that night, Rue meets with the DEA agents who are happy with her, and if everything works out in their favor, Rue's case will go in her favor according to them. As we'll talk about later, I don't see a world in which Rue survives all this and doesn't have to experience some prison time by the end of this season. Now, from the drug game to the OnlyFans world, we cut to Rue trying to warn Maddie about partnering with Alamo. But we can see that Maddie is laser focused on building a brand that doesn't answer to anyone. Cut to her at the Silver Slipper with a photo shoot with Cassie, Kitty, Magic, all prepping for the next big push as she is just simply laying the groundwork. Now, this is where Maddie officially meets Bishop as she tries to get Alamo to give the girls some time off so that she can introduce these girls to more people to help them grow their profiles, but Alamo isn't on board with this idea. Remember the opening scene with Alamo and how he feels about being screwed over again, whether it be with Laurie, Rue, and now possibly Maddie. But we see Bishop is in agreement that there are other people that are trying to screw with him, but he doesn't believe Maddie is one of them. As I said weeks ago, Maddie's one of my favorite characters, and I really do hope that it's not too late before Maddie wakes up and smells the roses about Alamo. Man, I was really hoping that Rue was going to tell Maddie the truth about Alamo and who she's getting the business with, but the more I thought about it, the words Rue and truth don't ever go hand in hand. I just hope that Maddie doesn't get hurt or worse, gets killed after maybe getting caught in between Alamo's mess with what's going on with Lori. Now here's where we cut to a whole nother show as we see Rue is with Jules. Jules is painted in front of Rue as Rue talks about the American dream, a nuclear family, a normal life with having kids that could magically solve her problems. Now Jules calls this out as a fantasy and the conversation starts to get a little toxic. Rue goes on about wanting to be with someone who loves her and thinks will give her purpose to live for something greater than herself. Now this is where Jules brings up their last time being together and how it was a mistake and how she's not reliable and how Rue and her relationship was pretty much in Rue's head the whole time, and honestly, she isn't lying. Now Rue pushes back and talks about Jules' relationship with Ellis, who again we know is a married man, and she says is basically keeping Jules as a toy, as that word basically kind of triggers Jules as she slaps Rue off of her chair and she tells her to leave before Ellis arrives soon. I think this is the first time we've seen Jules like physically hit Rue in a moment of anger. So that's kind of a new element of their relationship. Like I said, things were starting to get toxic between these two. But going back to the moment, this kind of explains Jules' breakdown with Lexi a few episodes ago. She wants to do something on her own, not with the help of Ellis, not with the help of anyone else, but thinking about that painting scene. Like she wanted her painting to be accepted by others, but when they told her no, that it wasn't what they wanted, and I think in her head, she heard that they didn't want her. Jules is yearning for love and true affection from someone who doesn't treat her like a toy or someone like Rue who just pops in and out of her life when it's convenient for them. Now, we see Rue in the elevator leaving as she begins crying, knowing that she can't find happiness in life and she can't find peace or love in the face of all the terrible stuff that she's currently experiencing. Now, let's talk about this scene for a second. I get that this was pretty much meant to serve as more of a scene for Rue and her wanting to have some normalcy. She talks about kids, a home, all of these being attempts to lock herself into something that's stable. And Jules labeling the fantasy because her own life is a collage of exploitation from Ellis and their relationship is unreliable. But I can't help but to feel like the show has zero clue on what to do with Jules, and honestly, this has been an issue since season 2. Now, as far as this season goes, I don't know if it was like a scheduling issue with Jules because it just feels like she's just being thrown into the show just for the sake of her being there for Rue. Very similar to how I feel like Nate is only here to service Cassie's story. Now, speaking of, back with Cassie, she's finally getting ready to film her one scene, and this being her opportunity to change her careers, as we can see that she's a little bit nervous. Now, the star of the show, Dylan, tries to give her some advice, but as he's about to find out, Cassie is way past the point of acting. As the cameras roll, we see something snaps inside of Cassie as she breaks character. She starts dropping lines about her current situation with Nate, about her past with Maddie, about how she's just trying to survive. Obviously, none of this is in the script, but Dylan plays along, as does Patty. Cassie pours her soul out about how she stole Nate and how she is now paying the price for it. The scene ends as Cassie's life has become a performance, so when she finally acts, it's just her leaking her real life trauma into the situation. And surprisingly, it worked. Patty pulls her to her side as this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Patty starts digging into who Cassie really is as Lexi brings up that she's into OnlyFans. Now, it's clear that Lexi was trying to sabotage her sister in a situation, which is kind of messed up, and she's being very judgmental as she normally is, but it ends up working in her sister's favor. Now, Cassie explains the fetishes and different requests that she gets from OnlyFans as the conversation goes into how OnlyFans can become this empowering expression for women. She tells Patty and the director that the site makes her feel seen and feel powerful. As Patty and the director are eating this up, they see old Hollywood in her story as they offer her a much larger role on the show, but under one condition. She has to leave OnlyFans world behind. And in true Cassie fashion, she doesn't hesitate as she says yes immediately. Now outside, we find Cassie jumping in and screaming in joy as her sister reminds her that in order for her dreams to come true, she will have to delete her OnlyFans for good this time around. Now in her apartment, we watch as Cassie slowly tries to build up the courage to delete her account as she's practicing the delete motion with her finger as she walks towards her computer. We see hundreds, if not thousands, of different messages that's been sent to her by her fans as she hovers over the delete option as it asks if she's sure that she wants to do this. Cassie begins to pray as she can't do it and she ends up calling Nate. Now, Nate doesn't answer the call, so Cassie has to be an adult and she makes a decision as she ultimately deletes her account to pursue her dreams as an actress. Let's talk about Cassie and her decision. We watch as Cassie goes from one obsession to the next without thought about her future. Personally, I'm surprised that she didn't put her account on hold or maybe archive it. If that's a thing you could do on OnlyFans, I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments below. But no, she decides to burn bridges before she even crosses the new one. And I bet Maddie won't be happy to hear the news. But looking at the bigger picture as it pertains to Cassie's character and her story, it just continues to show a pattern. Whether it's Nate or her OnlyFans or now acting, she's addicted to the idea of new life and not the work it takes to keep it. She's chasing a dream with zero guarantee, and I doubt this is going to work out for her. Now, while Cassie is celebrating, we see Lexi is busy taking the credit for the whole situation. Patty is impressed by Lexi's insight into her sister's career as she tasks Lexi with writing the new Cassie storyline into the show. The irony here is hilarious because the person who shamed and mocked her own sister for doing OnlyFans is now the person in charge of writing her sister's fictional life. To me, this whole scene kind of felt like a little bit of like real life commentary on Hollywood, because you hear about stories all the time about how people write about lives and struggles that they've only ever observed from afar, or worse, they've just judged people. But I'll tell you what, if there is one thing we know about Lexi, season 2's play showed us that she definitely knows how to write about her family and friends and has no shame in doing so. Now, sticking with the Howard sisters for a little bit here, we see Lexi talking to Gilly, who suggests that she kill off Cassie's character in the storyline because shows need stakes, otherwise it's just a bunch of characters talking to one another. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am because I feel like this was 1000% foreshadowing for Cassie. All this buildup of Cassie finally getting her big break. Is this all just to make her inevitable death being tied into what's going on with Maddie and Alamo and Nate and Nas? I don't know if y'all remember my prediction back in episode 1, but it goes back to the scene with Nate and Cassie sharing dinner with the candles surrounding them, and we had like this hard cut to seeing Alamo's girl actually dying. I think the show has been planting the seeds of Cassie's death and has been planted since the start of this season. Now, speaking of death, we see Cassie receiving a delivery, and inside she finds a note that says answer the phone with her husband Nate's finger inside. Now we cut to Nate, who's screaming and yelling at the endangered plant that's stalling his construction business as Nas's henchman is watching him. And he decides to beat Nate up yet again as Nate thinks that he's in control in the situation by stepping all over the flowers. But again, the henchman lets him know who's in control. I could have went without this Nate scene if I'm being honest with you all, because like I said earlier, I feel like Nate and Jules are living in completely different shows than everyone else. It's becoming really apparent that Nate and Jules have been completely wasted this season. I would say Nate has had more to do than Jules, but not much more if we're being honest. And honestly, I don't see that changing with only 2 episodes left. Now switching gears and going back to Rue, we see her at the 3D printing shop and she's getting Wayne's key copy. Now, she finds out this is going to be about an hour or so we watch as Rue decides to go to church. Now, in church, she gets a call from her mom, and it's actually her mom this time around, it's not the DEA. This, to me, was a beautiful, gut-wrenching scene that really showcased how incredible Zendaya really is as an actress. They have a conversation about Rue's newfound belief in God and how she sees the correlation in God's existence to her having redemption, and if there's redemption, there's salvation. Rue doesn't want to be stuck in her mistakes that she's made in the past. She just wants to be free, and she wants the opportunity to start over and being forgiven. She tells her mom that she misses her, and she says that she'll be seeing her mom soon, as she tells her mom that she loves her and she apologizes for making things hard on her. As she says she's coming home, we actually cut to seeing her mom for the first time this season as they hang up. We're left with Rue in church looking at God and smiling and praying. Yeah, it's in this moment that kind of told me that unfortunately, we won't be seeing Rue making it home anytime soon. Look, man, rule 101 with television and drama and movies is if a character is in the middle of a shitstorm and they say something like they're coming home soon, they're probably not going to make it home anytime soon. Honestly, seeing Leslie, her mom, for the first time this season kind of felt more like a goodbye than a hello. Now, my theory at the beginning of this season was Rue's going to probably end up dead, but that's kind of changed for me in the recent episodes. Now, we've seen Rue dodging death from the very beginning of the show, so I don't think that her dying is really a realistic possibility. There's still like a small chance that will happen, but regardless of her dying or not, I don't think she's going to be making it home either. I really feel confident now that she's going to probably end up in prison by the end of the season. With all the calls and mentions of Fez being in jail and the talk of second chances, I think prison might be the only place where she can actually be safe from her own impulses. It's a grim kind of salvation, but it's the reality of the situation. Now, thinking about the two main characters this season, that being Rue and Cassie, and how they're taking different paths in their storylines, but this episode, to me, really kind of highlighted the illusion of choice. Cassie thinks she's choosing a career, but she's really just choosing a new master. Rue thinks she's choosing home, but she might just be headed to a prison cell. What do you all think? Is Lexi gonna kill off Cassie's character in the script, or is the show, Euphoria, gonna kill her off for real? And when it comes to Rue, do you all think she's actually going on a path of redemption? Now, as we come to the close of this episode, we see Rue handing over the key to Alamo, but he gives it back to her and tells her that she should see it through since this is her own plan to getting his money back from Lori. We see Rue feeding Alamo's snake, and this is where she learns about the snake's previous owner from Bishop as we get more biblical connections. Now, I think we've all heard this story before, but I know I definitely have, and that being the same story about the snake not eating, and it's because of them making room to eat their owner. The moral of the story being that a snake is a snake at the end of the day, and just because they grow close to you doesn't mean that their intentions aren't to eat you. Now, Alamo didn't believe in this snake story, but saw the moral of the story and uses this snake as a reminder, and he bought the snake from its previous owner. That way, he can always remember to keep an eye out on people's true intentions. It's here that Bishop mentions that Rue needs to get into this safe, because if not, it would really be a shame that he would have to talk to her mom again about how well she's doing. Basically saying without saying, if you don't get the job done, he knows where her mom is and will be paying her a visit if Rue doesn't get the job done. Now, going back to that snake story, I want to know from you all, who do you all think is the biggest snake in Rue's life? Is it Lori? Is it Alamo? Is it Rue herself? Again, this scene to me served as a warning to Rue to look closer at who she can trust and to understand the true nature of the danger that surrounds her. Now, we end this episode with Rue on the road as she's trying to listen to her Bible audiobook, seeking some type of guidance, but it's not working. Now, the audio's cutting in and out, and it kind of mirrors her internal chaos that she's currently experiencing. Now, Rue's distracted, and she begins swerving in the road as a truck is heading her way, and at the very last second, she manages to avoid a collision. Now, was that a sign from God, a moment of divine intervention, telling her, not yet, Rue, you still have a purpose? Or was it just a terrifying wake-up call, a brush with morality that shocks her system? Either way, it signals a shift. Now, if that wasn't a sign, what she sees next absolutely is, as she finds a burning literal tree right in front of her. We open this penultimate episode with a story about mistakes and redemption as we flash back to Ali's past. Now, for those like me who watched the special episode between Rue and Ali, we remember that we learned a little bit more about his past, but this opening scene dives deeper into that past. We find the younger Ali back when he wasn't a man of God. Instead, we find him getting high, sharing crack with a woman played by the great Natasha Lyonne, who's portraying a nameless sex worker. She explains how she normally doesn't do black clients because of being afraid of dying, but Ali, with his good teeth and clean appearances, is an exception for the night. As they share some hits of crack, they talk casually about their kids and how they hope they don't follow in their parents' footsteps. This opener immediately sets the tone by Rue saying the great line of, without God, short-term desires became long-term patterns, and man, ain't that the truth. We can see that this is a part of Ali's cycle where his vices aren't just personal demons, they're also open wounds bleeding into his family life. Now again, for those that might not remember Ali's backstory from the previous seasons in that special episode, remember he was born by the name of Martin. Martin came from a home of domestic violence and addiction. His father would often drink and beat his mom, and as a result, Ali himself turned to alcohol and drugs as means to cope with his rough home life. Now later on in Ali's life, as time passed, he eventually got a job as a firefighter, as well as finding a wife and having his own 2 daughters. Now the issue of substance abuse was in their household during their marriage, which led to him and his wife eventually having these big arguments, which led to physical fights at times. Which leads us directly into this very next scene. We cut to a family dinner where you can sense the tension between Ali and his wife. Ali's wife questions his whereabouts as he ignores her, and their unresolved anger boils over to a full-blown fight in the other room while their 2 daughters silently sit there at the dinner table. This scene right here was just a brutal illustration of how addiction doesn't just destroy the individual users, but it often shatters everyone else's lives as well. From here, we see the meetups between Ali and the hooker weren't just one-offs. Ali and her reckless encounters became a regular occurrence. A desperate, self-destructive pattern fueled by crack and shared emptiness. These scenes here just really hammer home the point. Ali was living on the edge, slowly becoming a ghost, soon haunted by his own life. But then Ali had a wake-up call as he woke up in a hospital bed with a fresh scar on his chest after having surgery. He finds himself vulnerable, and the first thing he does is plead with the nurse to not give him any morphine. He knows at this point of his life, after what he just experienced, that he is just one mistake away, one relapse away from the end of his life. As we watch him crying in the bed, not because of the pain, but because he's realizing that he's come so close to losing everything and to losing himself as well. This is his rock bottom, his moment of truth. From his metaphorical deathbed, we jump to an NA meeting where a recovering Ali introduces himself to the others in need. This is his new mission. To change his habits, to heal his past, and transform his mistakes into blessings. To me, this directly mirrors the show's larger themes of redemption and the difficult, often brutal journey to sobriety. Just like Rue, Ali was trying to rebuild, to find purpose in the wreckage he left behind. We then see Ali actively living his mission, mentoring a young man by the name of Emmanuel. Emmanuel leans on Ali heavily, desperately trying to get and stay clean. You could say that Emmanuel was his Rue before Rue, as this scene of Ali hugging him highlights the deep responsibility and the emotional investment that he pours into his sponsees because he's been in their shoes before. In this moment, we can see the genuine care and belief Ali has in Emmanuel. But this show has never shied away from the harsh realities of what can happen sometimes with addiction. Despite Ali's dedication, we cut to a funeral. Emmanuel lost his battle with drugs. This moment here was a devastating reminder that even with the best intentions, the strongest support, addiction can still unfortunately claim its victims. It's a heartbreaking moment that shows Ali, even as a pillar of strength, isn't immune to loss. But even with experiencing his grief and despite losing some battles, Ali knows he's still doing good in the world because he has to believe it. We flash forward to the pandemic where we see Ali continues his mission. He's checking in on all his sponsees every single day, trying to keep them tethered in a world that feels like it's falling apart. But the pandemic brought its own cruel challenges, as there was no more in-person meetings, no more communal support systems available. Ali loses more and more people. He starts offering meetings at his own place, a desperate attempt to maintain connection, but the losses continue. We see him sitting alone, flipping through a book. This is his Book of the Dead. A ledger of names, a testament of every person he's lost to this disease. For Ali, this book served as a deeply personal reminder of how the story of addiction often ends for way too many. Now, my question for you all in the comments below, by next week's finale, will Rue be added to this Book of the Dead, or will it be passed down to her and she'll be tasked with keeping Ali's mission going as she goes on her own path of redemption? As far as my thoughts on this opening sequence, I thought it was brilliant because, as I said before, I'll say it again, the more Coleman Domingo, the better. He's one of the best working actors, in my opinion, working in Hollywood, and I've always loved this character, and this opening scene just reminded me so much of his work in 2023 Sing Sing, which I highly recommend you all check out that movie if you haven't already. Watching Ali's own dark past, his self-destruction, the family pain, the near-death experience just added more of the profound understanding of Rue's struggle as well. I've always said that he saw himself in her, and as this opening sequence showed, his desire to help her also serves as a form of atonement, a way to transform his own mistakes into blessings for others. Again, I just love the line about power of short-term desires and how they can become long-term patterns they create. And again, just seeing him living his life with his ghost of his past and the names in the Book of the Dead are just a constant motivation for him. And I thought, again, this opening was excellent. Ali's story is a powerful counterpoint to Rue, showing us that change is possible, but it's also a reminder that the scars remain and the fight is never truly over. Back to our present-day storylines, we get the return of Big Eddie. After getting shot and undergoing surgery, we see Eddie is left with a permanent scar and a colostomy bag. But if he expected to get a goodwill card and a welcome back from Alamo, he was sorely wrong. Alamo shows zero kindness, treating Eddie's trauma like a minor inconvenience for him as he immediately puts Eddie back to work. Alamo wants Eddie to prove himself and show redemption, which is a big theme about this episode, as it involves the deal with Lori. He is going to be the one to transport some of his girls to surgery with one of Lori's crew, and that being Mitch. Meaning he'll be working with the same people who shot him. I found it funny how Eddie having to work with Wayne and Harley was an interesting parallel to one of the themes of this episode. That being, these characters are being trapped in cycles with the very people who destroyed them at some point in their lives. Meanwhile, we see things get spiritual at Lexi's apartment. Rue tells Lexi about her recent experience with God as she mentions the burning Joshua tree from last week, claiming that God revealed himself to her. While Lexi is trying to write up her script for the show, we see Rue can't help but to run her damn mouth, and it will come back to bite her in the ass a little bit later in this episode. Rue keeps talking and says how she's been involved with some evil stuff, which leads to her telling Lexi about her working with Nazis before she ever met Alamo. But then Rue tells her that she's also an undercover informant for the DEA. Now, Lexi basically laughs her off, accusing Rue of using again. This leads to a back and forth between the two friends as Lexi cuts deep by mentioning how Rue's mom won't even speak to her, as Rue corrects her about their speaking terms with her mom as she leaves. Now, as she leaves Lexi's apartment, Rue notices the blinds moving in Cassie's apartment. She goes to investigate as we see a gun barrel pointed directly at Rue's head from behind the door. Someone is ready to pull the trigger, but Rue leaves just in time, leaving us jumping back a few days to see how Cassie got to this point. Naz calls Cassie, demanding that she take over her husband's debt collection duties. But unfortunately, her decision last week to deleting her OF account is catching up to her sooner than I expected, as she tries everything that she can to get her account back, but none of it works. Now, to make matters worse, Cassie gets fired from the show because a studio head convinces Patty to fire her because of her profession, as Patty makes her sister, Lexi, deliver the news. Now, on the bright side, Patty lets Lexi know that they loved her script and they'll be using it for the show, but this time around, they'll be using an actual actor this time. Meanwhile, Maddie gets fired from her job for being a part of Cassie's hiring on the show, and shortly after, she learns about Cassie deleting her OF account. Now, we can see that Maddie is clearly pissed, which rightfully so, as she heads to Cassie's place, who is on the floor crying as Maddie wants to beat her ass, but she has to get up off the floor and she wants to slap some sense into her. Maddie slaps Cassie across the face and tells her how things are going to be going from now on. She will work and not complain about it, and from now on, Maddie isn't her manager anymore, she's her boss. Maddie sets the plan in motion as she takes control of the situation. She sets up a PR stunt with Dylan, as she also calls TMZ to spark dating rumors to get Cassie's engagement back up. Now, this leads to Cassie taking Dylan to her apartment. Cassie quickly uses her body to manipulate the situation, telling Dylan how people underestimate her. Cassie has Dylan take pictures of them to remember this moment as she memorizes his phone's password. Now, last week we didn't see any nudity, but we get the return of the twins from Cassie as we see her hooking up with Dylan, and as they're hooking up, she doesn't let him get any resting break, she doesn't let him get any water, but she eventually lets him get up to get some water while she works her magic. We watch as Cassie breaks into his phone phone and posts the photos of them and puts in the caption how good of a hookup she is, as Dylan's in the kitchen drinking water with Nate's finger in the cup for some added flavor. Now Dylan falls asleep at her house as his phone is blowing up. Now we cut to the next morning where Maddie finds out how Cassie was able to get the photos of them posted on Dylan's account, as their night together has been trending all night long, leading to Cassie regaining over 100,000 new subscribers on her new OF account. But their time to celebrate is cut short as Maddie notices Nate's cut off finger in the sink. Now, speaking of Nate, we find him at Naz's funeral home as he promises Cassie will come through with the money that he needs. Now, Cassie has yet to send any money to Naz, who now believes that she might be enjoying way too much of her freedom and needs some motivation to remind her what's at play and the seriousness of the situation. And as we'll see later, he pays her a visit that she'll never forget. Now back with Rue, she tells Ali everything going on with her, as he tells her that he wishes she would have told him earlier because he's got a 12-gauge shotty that could have handled the situation. Rue also tells him about the plan with the DEA and how this plan must go as planned, or else Rue's family, and particularly her mom, will be in danger, as she promises him that this would be her last run. As they eat pancakes, Rue tells Ali what God told her about seeing her pain and how close she is to her freedom. Rue tells him that she knows that once this is all over, she'll be moving to Texas to the homestead close to where the family we met back in episode 1 stays, as she looks at this as the promised land. Now, Ali brings up if Rue has ever thought about the fentanyl that she smuggled in and if she's worried about it killing people, as Rue responds by saying that she believes by putting the people that's selling the drugs in prison will make up for all of her sins. Now, Ali makes Rue promise him that she won't go through with the deal and that they'll pick up her mother first thing in the morning. As Ali shares something important with Rue about how everything that begins must have an end and everything in this moment is an actual blessing.
Life, no matter what, is being pulled towards a brighter future. And even if it doesn't feel like it, right now is a blessing. And if you step back from this moment and look at the history of your life in the history of the world, you'll see that there's never been anything but blessing.
Now it's here we see Ali sharing the fate of what happens to Moses in the Promised Land, and that being that he died, which to me was maybe some foreshadowing for what's going to happen to Rue next week. Is Rue's freedom actually just going to be a form of death? Now cut to the Silver Slipper where Kitty shares the news with the rest of the girls that she'll be getting a BBL in Mexico, all of the expenses being covered by Alamo, aka not knowing that she's the mule for the job between him and Lori. Now our next scene shows Eddie and Mitch on the road with Kitty and the other girl in the back as the DEA agents make their plans to catching them. Now during all this, Rue lied to Ali and left to finish the job as she left him a note asking for his forgiveness. Rue's now with G as she comes up with her story of what she's going to tell Lori, which includes her damn near breaking her nose and injuring herself to make it look like Alamo beat her up. Now inside Lori's house and being greeted by her, we see Rue lies and warns Lori that Alamo is coming for her next. Now while Rue is lying for her life, we see Cassie is close to losing hers. We see Naz's henchman choke slamming her into a table, which completely knocks her out. As she wakes up tied up to her bed, we see Naz gives her 72 hours to find the money, and she wonders why it's 72 hours. Well, that's because that's how long it takes someone to die of dehydration, which takes us back to Nate. The villain we've all hated for the past 2 seasons finds himself buried alive in his own construction site. Now they left Nate a small hole to breathe, but this is where the episode becomes a full-blown Discovery Channel nightmare. As Nate's struggling and screaming for help, he actually draws in a rattlesnake, and if you ask me, I wouldn't be surprised if that is the same rattlesnake that we saw back in episode 1. Can I talk to y'all for a second, man? Could you imagine being in Nate's position right now? Like, seriously, what the hell would you even do in this situation? To me, this scene also kind of felt like an homage to Kill Bill, which we know how that played out, where this time around, this is like the worst case scenario, as the rattlesnake slithers down into the hole, into the coffin. And then at this point, if you guys don't notice about me, I am not ashamed to admit I am terrified of snakes. So watching a snake crawl down that hole, moving around the casket, making its way to his chest, and the moment that I really didn't anticipate this to happen, the snake climbs on his chest and bites Nate right in the throat. It's a moment to celebrate because of how much we hate Nate, but at the same time, it's also kind of bittersweet. The reason I say that is because, as we discussed in the last few weeks, Jules, who, by the way, wasn't even in this episode, which is crazy, but Jules and Nate have, as I said, have been completely wasted this season. So my bittersweetness comes from the fact that if we would have had more time with Nate this season, this moment of what happens to him would have felt more impactful. But instead, we have to rely on his past sins from season 1 and 2 to make this moment have any meaning. And if you kind of think about it, it's kind of poetic in a crazy way to see the snake himself, that being Nate, meeting his end at the hands, or I should say at the bite of an actual snake. After years of Nate manipulating and torturing and destroying everyone's lives, he dies alone in the dark, in the dirt. It's a brutal, iconic end to a character who thought that he was untouchable. Now, as we close out this episode, we find Wayne and Faye and crew are celebrating by a fire. Rue is there, and her lies have finally caught up to her as well. Now, Wayne actually is thankful for Rue's lies because it helped him find Faye, but as he says to his dad, treason requires punishment. I love the cinematography, and I love this shot here because we see the fire that's framed right behind Rue's head, making it look like she's already in hell. Now, Rue stays in character. She doesn't break, even though Wayne ultimately cuts her hand open, as he makes her promise that she's going to kill Alamo the next morning. Now, while all this was happening, we see Cassie calls Maddie for help as Nas gives her instructions to get him his $1 million in cash, or else he'll start slicing up Cassie's face. Now, Maddie calls the one person who he knows that can help her out in a situation as she arrives at Alamo house and she finds a bikini that's waiting for her. Now, at this point, Maddie clearly knows what he's going to be expecting from her, as Magic has to remind her that she can trade in 1,000 bad days for a good life, as Maddie is prepared to pimp herself out for Cassie. Now, I'm not going to lie, it really took me a moment to really buy into this decision by Maddie. Because if you think about it, after everything Cassie has done to her in the past and present, why in the hell would Maddie be willing to do all this for Cassie? Well, the more I thought about it, it's actually kind of simple. It boils down to money and power. Now, I do think Maddie is a good person at heart, and I do think she actually cares about Cassie and Nate's bitch-ass well-being, but I would also think that it also is like an extra motivation that she can also make money off Cassie, so it just makes sense for her to go this extra length of pimping herself out to helping her friend. Again, money and power has been the ultimate driving force for a lot of these characters this season, and as we see, it puts them in the most vulnerable situations. We cut to Maddie in the bikini asking for Alamo's help with Nas as he has her get into the hot tub. Maybe we can blame this on being nervous, but we watch as Maddie accidentally slips up and tells Alamo that Rue got into a fight with Lexi, but then she doesn't stop there. She goes on and talks about her troubles with the Nazis and brings up how Rue is involved with the DEA. Again, I don't know why in the hell Maddie would say that besides Sam Levinson writing this for her character to step out of character just to create more drama, but we see Alamo doesn't respond to what he just learned. Instead, he has her start to get closer to him and starts rubbing her feet. Now, y'all best believe that Alamo's going to keep this information in his memory bank, and more than likely, he's going to use that against Rue and probably kidnap her mom. But for right now, he's keeping his cool because he got his eyes set on Maddie. Now, we don't actually see what happens next between Alamo and Maddie, and we're kind of left with our own imagination, but it's safe to assume that he got something from her sexually to what led him to do what he's going to do next. As we cut to Alamo getting dressed up and loading up his gun, and he has a bag of what we think is money inside for Nas as Maddie thanks him. Now at Nate's construction site, Alamo and Maddie arrive with the money as Maddie has to complete the deal and exchange the money for Cassie and Nate, not knowing that he's actually already dead. Maddie drops the bag of money as Nas has Cassie go get the bag of money. Now, Nas opens the bag and he's upset to not find his money as Alamo gets to finally actually shoot someone this season as he shoots Nas in the chest and walks up to him and kills him in front of the henchmen, Maddie, Cassie, as they just sit by and watch. I'm not entirely sure what Nas is saying to his henchman, Arthur, I believe his name was, but I'm assuming that the henchman was like, I'm not about to lose my life to protect this man that's about to die, and maybe he sees working for Alamo as a new opportunity for him. Now, Arthur uses one of the forklifts to dig up Nate as Alamo lets Maddie know that she will be in debt for him moving forward. Now, as Nate is brought up to the surface, Cassie opens the coffin to find her recently married husband's dead corpse with the snake still in his chest as Cassie breaks down in tears. Now, I might be wrong, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below how you all took this shot here, which we don't spend a lot of time on, but it's the shot of Maddie, and she looks upset. Like, she looks visibly upset. In my mind, I think she feels bad, not only for Cassie, but I think she also feels bad for Nate because she loved him. Even though they had an abusive relationship, I do think she feels bad about the situation. But again, that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you all thought of this reaction from Maddie in the comments below. Now, as we end this penultimate episode, back at Lori's, Wayne tells Faye that he wants her to kill Rue. Meanwhile, Faye being a wild card, she breaks Rue out of the room that she was locked in as they head down to the safe. Not gonna lie, man, this scene had me on pins and needles because it was so tense as it felt like I was watching a video game with characters trying not to wake up the big bad boss. We see Rue and Faye break into the safe only to find everything else but money. Inside the safe, they find a bunch of IDs of all the girls Alamo has either trafficked or got rid of. Now, Faye feels like Rue screwed her over and lied to her and begins arguing with Rue, and this is why you should never trust a person with big lips like Faye. I'm just kidding, but Faye shouts Wayne's name and wakes him up, and all of this is in her way of betraying Rue. Every beginning must have an end. It's crazy to think how we first met these characters 7 years ago on June 16, 2019, and since then we've gotten many moments where we laughed, we've cried, we've been frustrated with some of the behind the scenes drama, and at one point we thought that we would never see the show again. But today we finally say goodbye to one of the most polarizing shows on television forever. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving deep into the series finale, episode 8 of Euphoria season 3. This hour-and-a-half finale threw a lot at us, and truthfully, some of it worked, and honestly, some of it didn't. But that's what we're here to do, and that's break it all down from the deeper meanings of all of the important scenes, breaking down the important themes, and so much more. Full spoilers ahead. So right at the start of this episode, I immediately felt that something was different. This episode didn't open with a flashback, but more importantly, we didn't get Rue's narration. We were just thrown right into the thick of things as we see G is asleep in his truck as we cut back to Faye screaming Wayne's name. Now Rue doesn't hesitate and thinks quickly on her feet as she grabs the first thing she sees, which is a hefty wrench, and without a second thought, she cracks it across Wayne's knee and punches Faye in the face, which honestly, I wish she would have hit Faye with that wrench as well. As Rue is running for her life through the underground tunnels, Wayne and his bones sticking out of his knee is chasing after her, shooting and missing like an idiotic stormtrooper. Rue manages to break free, but then enter Harley on a horseback, lassoing Rue and dragging her back to Lori's. Now as Rue is headed back to where it all started, G nails Harley with the distance shot to his shoulder as he yells at Rue to get up and run. Now as they pull off, we see that Rue has Alamo stuff in the bag that she stole back from the safe. We see them in the truck celebrating, and that, my friends, is our first taste of Rue's false hope in this episode. She thinks she's escaped. She thinks she's almost at the finish line, but this is just the beginning of her end. Now, from a high-octane escape chase sequence, we switch over to a complex relationship between friends who have built their relationship on just using one another. We cut to Maddie and Cassie, looking broken and disheveled, sitting in a diner after their incredibly intense, violent night. These two, who have been through so much individually and with each other, are at their lowest point. Maddie, normally the one with all the answers and the queen of confidence, we can see that she looks completely lost, as for the first time that I can remember, Maddie actually asks Cassie what she should do in this situation with being in a life debt with Alamo. Cassie, who often looked to Maddie for guidance this entire season, is now offering solace. We watch as she goes over to Maddie and sits next to her as she's crying, and she puts her head on her shoulder and she takes her hand and tells her that they'll figure it out together. Honestly, this was a moment that actually kind of made me feel something inside for both of these characters in this situation because it was just an unexpected moment of actual sisterhood. There was no BS between these two in this moment. They weren't trying to impress one another or try to screw over the other person. Just a real vulnerable connection between two girls who have been through hell, as Maddie knows that she will have to become one of Alamo's girls if she wants to pay off her debt. Now back to Rue. She's now with the real architect of her current troubles, and that being Alamo. He goes through the stolen bag from Lori's safe, and everything Lori took from him is there. He looks at Rue with a smile and tells her that she did a good job and that he's proud of her, building this sense of hope inside of Rue. And here is where Alamo's game of manipulation takes complete control. He sits Rue down and takes a Percocet and offers one to her for her pain. Now, despite having stolen his stuff back from Lori, he tells Rue that their truce and their deal is still on the table and set to be completed by the end of the night. Now, Alamo gives Rue a week off, telling her that she's the employee of the month, and he hands her over a bag of cash, which he says is a token of his appreciation. But then this is where the devil offers the forbidden fruit. Now, he leaves Rue with the bottle of what Rue thinks are the painkillers he just took for her pain. This is the ultimate sinister false hope. Alamo is getting into Rue's mind as he remembers what Maddie told her about Rue and the DEA, and this is a move that is all a part of him getting back at her. What he just told Rue wasn't a reward, it was just a deadly trap. Giving an addict money and pills while praising them for their work is the most insidious form of control, as he's taking complete advantage of Rue's vulnerability. Rue thinks she's earned a moment of peace, but in reality, this would lead to the end of her life. Meanwhile, the other side of this dark coin is unfolding in Mexico. As the deal is almost complete, we see Rue is getting stitches, and in a quiet, vulnerable moment, she tears up, thinking once again that she's almost done. But, like I just mentioned, in reality, her addiction is being weaponized against her, and her vulnerability is being exploited by a man who cares only about himself and his money. Now, back in Mexico, we see Bishop is overseeing the deal, making sure everything goes smoothly and preparing to follow through with their own plan. The drugs are being loaded, as are the girls who just had their surgeries. Now, a small detail in this moment is Mitch goes inside and he has this bad feeling that something's going on, as he notices when he comes back that Eddie claims that he mistakenly threw away the Coke bottle that he was just drinking, even though he wasn't done. Now, Mitch doesn't make a big deal of it as they drive off and they eventually pass through the border control and they head back to Los Angeles. Now, after getting her stitches, we catch up with Rue, who's now at Ali's house, and they talk about the nature of evil and it being inherent in people. Those comments by Ali will have a major effect throughout the rest of this episode, as we see Rue's going to stay the night at his house. Now, as Rue is laying down on the couch, she looks at her hand and she goes in her bag and takes out the painkillers that Alamo gave her as she listens to her Bible. Now, I want to pose this question to you all in regards to how you read this scene. Was Rue truly in pain in this moment and only wanted to take the pills for her pain? Or do you all think that she kind of gave in to her battle against addiction and she wanted to take the pills to both relieve her pain, but also numb herself to sleep like she used to do back when she would really struggle with her addiction? For me personally, I would like to think that Rue was just trying to relieve herself of the pain, but regardless, this decision that she's about to make will end up being the last one that she makes because it ends up killing her. Now, during this, the chaos erupts at Lori's farm. All her pets inside the house are beginning to yell and scream, which is a sign of the storm that's about to hit. Recovering from his knee injury, we see Wayne takes the drugs that they stole from Alamo, and it's here that he finally listens to Faye and realizes that this is all the setup. I'm not gonna lie, guys, this was the worst part of the entire episode for me, what happens between him and Faye, as surprisingly, they managed to make a quick escape, riding past the incoming authorities just as Lori's whole operation is about to get shut down. In a matter of seconds, it's all over. Harley and Bruce think about shooting their way out of the situation, but they ultimately give up and get arrested. Meanwhile, in a more shocking and brutal moment, we see Lori, who says to herself before the police arrive that there's no way she's going to go to jail, as we watch her jump off her roof and hang herself. I'm not going to lie, man, I did not expect Lori to take her own life, but I guess she said to herself, I ain't going to jail because I won't last 1 second with my soft, monotone voice, because she probably know that she would be someone's bitch as soon as she stepped into prison. But the twists keep on coming as we learn that Alamo, the smiling devil, gets the last laugh. He had Bishop switch out the trucks of drugs, the same one we thought Eddie was supposed to deliver. And speaking of Eddie, turns out that he was actually working for the DEA. Now, I'm not entirely sure if he was working for them like long term or if this was like a recent development after he got shot. Either way, it is a massive betrayal that explains a lot about what was going on with him once he returned to the back half of the show. Now, at this point, Lori's crew has either been busted or dead, while Faye and Wayne managed to hitch a ride, disappearing into the night. I hated this outcome for that Nazi and the bubble-lipped idiot Faye. Like, why the hell did Sam keep them alive? Why didn't he get them arrested? Or better yet, why the hell didn't he kill them? Like, why do they get a happy ending of a sorts? Let me know what you all thought of Faye and the Nazi Wayne surviving. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But now, here is where the episode gets incredibly heavy, and I'll be honest, this is where I got super emotional. Now, back at Ali's, it's morning time and Rue wakes up, or so we think, as she sees a news report about Fez escaping prison while using parkour. For a minute, y'all, the show got me because I actually thought that this was actually happening, because why not? It's Euphoria. Of course Fez is going to break out of prison using parkour. Now, Rue, remembering her promise to Fez about picking him up if he ever got out as she's about to leave to go get him. We see Ali cannot stop her from leaving as he spots that she has taken the pills from the bottle. Again, y'all, in this moment, I was thinking to myself, God damn it, Rue, she's high again, she's not thinking clearly, her mind is just spiraling out of control. But what follows is a incredibly vivid yet ultimately tragic journey into the afterlife for our girl, Rue. Rue is convinced that she knows what Fez is as she drives like a maniac through the streets, revisiting old places from season 1 and season 2. We even get flashes of seeing a younger version of Rue and even the first time she saw Jules. We get this flashback, which I'm assuming is a deleted scene from season 1 and 2, as we see Rue and Fez in the middle of a yard just hanging out, having a good time. And I'm not gonna lie, this is where my glasses start to get a little foggy. We see Rue ultimately running from the police as they are chasing her through her old neighborhood as she's heading straight to her house. Rue makes it home wearing her old dad's hoodie, which is a very potent detail. She sits in her room for a second and walks through the familiar halls before finding her mother in the living room reading the Bible. Her mom reaches out to her and she reaches back as they hug and embrace each other, and it quickly switches to her hugging her dad as this is being cut between her still on Ali's couch. And this is where the moment hit me like a brick. This was Rue seeing the light. Her revisiting all the moments and people who meant something to her. In this moment of comfort, we cut back to Ali's couch. Again, this entire frantic, hopeful chase for Fez, this imagined homecoming was all in Rue's mind. A cruel yet beautiful and utterly heartbreaking hallucination. The moment in which we cut to her on Ali's couch as she's embracing both her mom and her dad, it's a moment of profound peace and love for Rue one last time. After seasons of falling in love with Rue and being frustrated with Rue and everything in between, it's here in this quiet, intimate moment that the devastating truth unfolds. What we are witnessing is Rue experiencing an overdose as she slowly and tragically is dying. And just like that, Rue is finally free. No more running, no more chasing that high. Rue is dead. Man, I know this will be the talk of the episode, and rightfully so, and I can see maybe people blaming Maddie for accidentally telling Alamo about the DEA situation last week, and I know a lot of people are going to point to many different moments of how Rue got to this point, but the truth is, Rue was never going to get a happy ending because of her choices. Look, man, I know this show isn't for everyone because it can be messy. It is definitely provocative. There's full of drama attached to it. And I can go on, but this show, to me, has earned Rue's death. Not only has the prior seasons led to this moment, but this entire season was about her seeking God's guidance and seeking redemption. Even the very first scene of this season, we saw her tiptoeing around with death. And in a moment of weakness, death finally found her. Man, that entire sequence just had me in tears. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. Like, from Fez's escape to them in the field with Rue, the peaceful embrace of her parents. I know Sam Levinson sometimes writes himself in a corner and sometimes he writes some complete nonsense, but I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like Sam was thinking about Angus Cloud and his untimely passing within this scene. To me, this scene painted the picture of the character Fez, who in Rue's mind before she died was him finding his way out. He found his second chance, if you will, only for it to be a phantom hope in Rue's dying moments. Again, to me, this feels like Sam Levinson in this hypothetical narrative is grappling with the cruel reality of addiction and how, for some, that second chance, that escape, never materializes. Look, man, again, I know this is going to be a very hot topic of this show and this finale, and I know for some people, I can imagine the message doesn't necessarily sit well for them, and I respect that because the battle and experiences of addiction looks completely different for everyone. But for me, with my experience with people that I know that's gone through addiction, I found this to be a brutal reminder that life doesn't always offer a redo for some of those people that suffer through this disease and suffer through addiction, unfortunately. I can speak for hours about the beauty and the tragedy of this scene, and particularly Zendaya's performance. Oh my goodness, man, what a great performance. But I'll just end this section by saying this. 3 seasons of pure excellence by Zendaya as Rue, and again, throughout all her ups and downs, throughout the show and throughout this season, Rue will go down in my eyes as one of the most iconic and memorable and tragic and complex characters that I've ever seen on television, and man, her death will definitely be sticking with me for a while. Now, back to the scene, Ali eventually wakes up and his worst nightmare is realized, as he tries to wake Rue up only to find her dead on his couch. Man, talk about another great performance by Coleman Domingo. If I wasn't already emotional, Ali's reaction to finding Rue just completely broke me as we watch him praying for her and he asks for God to help her find peace as he kisses her head and he says his final goodbye. Ali will go on to add Rue's name to his book of the dead. But Ali's journey of grief immediately turns to a quest of understanding and ultimately vengeance. He takes the drugs that Alamo gave Rue and tested and sees that they were laced with fentanyl, the very thing that got her roped into Alamo from the very beginning of the show. At the end of the day, I've been calling Alamo a devil all season long, and he, on purpose, gave her a death sentence knowing her addiction would take over, and he killed Rue. Ali, the man who dedicated his life to helping others find sobriety, the man who promised to keep Rue safe, now has to make the most agonizing call as we see him telling Leslie, Rue's mom, that her daughter is gone. It's a call that no parent should ever receive, and it's a call that no friend should ever have to make. Now, months pass by since Rue's death as we see Ali at his last NA meeting sharing what he just experienced. He talks about empathy for people struggling with addiction, but also how he feels that the dealers who are knowingly selling poison to the kids, for them, he has no empathy because they're just simply evil. In an incredibly powerful monologue, Ali admits he's lost his faith.
Christian, Muslim. Suddenly, I found myself not believing in shit.
He's had his first drink in a long time because of the weight of Rue's death and the countless others that are just crushing him. He speaks with an almost righteous anger about the insidious distribution of fentanyl, which is the silent killer preying on vulnerable lives. Again, he tells everyone that this is his last meeting as he's tired of losing the kids to bad people and tired of this cycle. Ali is determined to find another way to be of service as we cut to him at his home modifying his shotgun. The message is clear. Ali is preparing to take revenge for Rue. His path is shifted from this spiritual guidance to a darker, more earthly form of justice. Now, I want to backtrack a bit because I have to admit I do have some issues in regards to the handling of Rue's death scenes. One thing that comes to mind is, and I know I haven't spoken about this in weeks now, but I got to bring it up here, Labyrinth's score was sorely missed in her death scene because I can only imagine that moment would have been amplified, would have been more emotionally satisfying if we would have had his incredible score in that scene. Secondly, I kept thinking, why didn't we get a funeral scene for Rue? We could have got her mom, obviously Gia could have returned, obviously all of her close friends could have been there to mourn the loss of the most important character of the show. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized the hard truth of the situation again, which is the brutal reality of addiction. Sometimes, as harsh as it may be, life just goes on. It's cold and unforgiving to those left behind. It's an uncompromising look at the consequences of addiction, and it's only amplified by the heartbreaking truth of what Angus Cloud went through with his own battle. It reminds us that for every glimmer of hope, there's always the very real and very dark possibility of some not making it to the other side of addiction. And that's exactly what we witness in the back half of this finale. Now, this next scene just amplified my feelings toward this wasted character. We cut to Jules, who last she saw Rue, she smacked her to the ground, but here we see her create an oil painting of Rue, in which looked like some type of moment that they shared together in the earlier seasons. I don't want to spend too much time on this because obviously there's not a lot to break down, and obviously the show didn't really spend too much time on Jules, but I spoke to this a few times throughout the season, but I'll just say it again. Jules was completely wasted in this entire season. As much as I'm a fan of Jules and the actress Hunter Schafer, she could have easily been used in the wedding episode as like a guest spot, and that would have been fine. The whole sugar baby Ellis relationship working with Lexi stuff added zero value to this season. I'm assuming it had to do with scheduling, like her and Nate to me, like I mentioned earlier, were completely wasted. But again, the only thing I can think of is they must have had like the worst schedule and they were just limited to screen time. At least that's what I'm thinking in my head. Let me know in the comments because this is the only scene that we got of Jules, which is so crazy to think of how this character was like one of the most important characters in season 1. And obviously the painting and the writing was on the wall that there wasn't a lot to do with her in that season, and it carried over to the 3rd season. But let me know what you all thought of Jules in this scene, in this season. Was she wasted? What do you all think the character in universe, like what does Jules do now? Like does she continue to be a sugar baby to Ellis? Does she move on? Like what does Jules do? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now across town, we find the Howard sisters. Cassie, who chased fame online, is now in business with Maddie as they're running their empire out of the very house she shared with her late husband, Nate. Now we watch as Cassie tries to rope Lexi into the fold, offering her a spot as their lead storyteller, but Lexi is a little busy reading Rue's Bible. Now look, if you all have been following my breakdowns, I always try to find the message of each episode and break down the importance of each scene. But if I'm being honest with y'all, I didn't give one damn about this scene between Lexi and Cassie and what the hell they were even talking about. Lexi talks about she didn't want to blame herself to what happened with Rue. Cassie apparently told everyone that Nate disappeared and isn't coming back. And they talk about how Rue had a great smile and they share their thoughts about the Bible. Blah, 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 blah. Look, I'm sorry, but let me know how you all felt about the scene. If there was anything that you all took away from it, let me know in the comments, please. Now, ultimately, Lexi walks away and chooses her own path. She's not going to help her sister be a storyteller. She's going to do her own thing now, leaving Cassie to the reality of her own happy ending. Now, we don't see any more Lexi for the rest of the episode, but again, I'm assuming that she's just going to be a Hollywood writer and write her own stories and live her own life. But let's talk about Cassie. Cassie's now a dead-ridden OnlyFans creator, left crying alone in the mansion that feels more like a mausoleum. Admittedly, I thought Cassie's story was actually a highlight this season, but this being her last scene kind of felt a bit underwhelming. But again, she wanted her own independence, and she kind of got that in a way. She has her own business with her best friend, and honestly, I gotta give props to like the last shot, like the meaning of the shot, or at least like the cinematography and the message and like the symbolism in this shot. This last shot of Cassie is in the middle of the spotlight, as she's always wanted to be, as she's crying and the camera pulls away, showing physically the emptiness that she's left with inside. So I'll give the show its props in regards to the symbolism in the scene in the last time we see Cassie, but I do have a question for you all in the comments below. What do you all think they did with Nate's body? As I digress, meanwhile, we see Maddie is handling her debts as well. Now we see that she's heading out with Bishop to give Alamo his cut of what her and Cassie have made, but she's also about to meet up with him to give him her body as a payment as well. Now, before arriving to the club, we get this innocent conversation that she's having between Bishop about him getting a new dog and just having, again, a very innocent conversation. But little does Maddie know, this conversation would end up saving her life. We cut to the Silver Slipper where Maddie is greeted by Alamo with a kiss as they head back to the back, and the look on Bishop's face says it all as he clearly cares about Maddie. Now in the private room in the back, we see Alamo talking to Maddie about how he's allowed the thing in between women's legs to control his life, and he's now ready for a change. He shares with Maddie that he wants the American dream with her in particular, the white picket fence, the kids, everything that comes with it, basically repeating the very words that Rue once romanticized with Jules. But outside, in comes Vengeance, aka Ali. Here he is ready to fulfill his new purpose, dressed in his military gear and prepared to get back into soldier mode as he locks the door from the inside and he's looking for Alamo. Boy, this scene put a big old smile on my face, y'all. Like, I was smiling from ear to ear. I was sitting up this whole scene. Like, this scene was excellent. As we see, Kitty now has her BBL. She tries to dance on Ali, but he stops her and he asks to speak to the manager as she goes in the back to talk to G. Now, Ali and G have a conversation which leads to him pulling the shotgun out on G, and he asks what happened with Rue, and he confirms that she overdosed, and it was all because Alamo gave her the drugs. G makes a move and Ali shoots him dead in his private part, and he screams for Alamo to come out as he holds the place hostage. Look, the cowboy stuff this season has kind of been hit or miss for me, but again, this entire sequence was flat out incredible because it's the only time, because I feel like Sam Levinson has been chasing the high of like a Quentin Tarantino type of project, but this was the only time that I felt that Quentin Tarantino influence because it felt like a scene that was cut straight out of Django Unchained. From the other side of the glass, Alamo throws the head of a bull at Ali and knocks the shotgun out of his hand. Ali goes to reach for it and he points it at Alamo, but at this point Alamo has grabbed Maddie and tosses her at him as he gets his gun from Bishop. Alamo knows that Ali is low as the standoff takes place, and Alamo and Ali agree to have a good old-fashioned Mexican standoff. Ali tells Alamo he was sent here by Rue, as Alamo has Kitty bring him a champagne bottle as he drinks from it, and instructs her to roll the bottle off the bar and to take their shots at each other once it hits the ground. As it slowly rolls, both men watch, but Alamo cheats and he shoots first, but he's out of bullets, y'all, as he looks at Bishop, who took the bullets out, as he knows that he screwed him over, and Ali shoots and kills Alamo for Rue and for all the people he was responsible for killing over his years. Now, Ali walks over to Bishop, and he sees that he was the one who took the bullets out of the gun, and he says to Ali, "May God have mercy," as Ali walks away, and Bishop offers Maddie a ride, as she takes the money, and she's now free of Alamo's debt. Now, a lot of you all are probably wondering, why the hell did Bishop do that? Well, first and foremost, I don't think Bishop did that for Rue or for anyone else but Maddie. They clearly didn't have a lot of scenes together, but the ones they had, she treated him nicely, especially the one that we saw in this episode, and he had a crush on her. That's pretty obvious, and I don't blame him because Maddie is that girl. But seriously, the betrayal that Bishop did to his boss has been set up this whole season. There were so many moments that we saw Bishop growing tired of Alamo's nonsense and what he's been doing to everyone, again, including Maddie in this last episode. And when he saw Maddie's life's in danger, he finally decided to take action. I know a lot of you all have been theorizing that maybe he was working with the DEA, but I actually like that this was the reason that he changed, and this was the reason, like, someone made him change, right? He wanted to do good for once. It doesn't erase all the other evil shit he did this season. Like, remember, he, like, dismembered a person earlier in the season, so he's not completely sinless, but at the same time, I do like that moment for Alamo and Bishop being responsible for that to a certain extent, and Ali taking out Alamo. Like, again, this whole scene was excellent, and it just goes to show that Bishop was one of the best parts of this season. But I do have a question. What happens now? Will the Silver Slipper just like shut down? What is Kitty gonna do with that BBL now? Will Maddie and Bishop like officially date? Did Magic ever get that damn neck brace off of her neck? No, but in all seriousness, I thought this scene was excellent, and I thought that Bishop being a part of Alamo's death was just like a really nice touch to it. And again, seeing Ali in his military gear was nothing short of being a badass moment that I'll always remember. Now, speaking of Ali, we end this finale with Ali, who goes back to using his real name, or his original name, which is Martin, as he's now at the homestead to meet the family and to see the most peaceful place that Rue spoke of. Now, the family is upset to hear the news about what happened to Rue as they invite Martin inside. Inside, we see the table is set for dinner, and we notice that there is an empty chair where Rue should be sitting. As Martin prays over the food, we see this beautiful cinematography that leans into the heavenly golden hour as Ali looks at the end of the table. And here I'm thinking I was done with my thug tears for the episode, but no. I forgot to mention earlier, he said that he was here because of his daughter. But here we see Martin sees Rue peacefully smiling back at him as the camera pans outside. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of season 3 of Euphoria, and also the end of the show in its entirety. Look, man, my thoughts about the finale, besides the issues that I talked about earlier in my breakdown, I thought that this was a satisfying, emotional ending to this conclusion of the story. The standout moments being the opening, Rue's death, and Ali's revenge at the club. Those to me were like standout moments and maybe some of the best moments of this entire series. As far as my thoughts of the season, yes, it took a bit to get going. Yes, it was beyond annoying and frustrating that half the cast didn't share scenes together because of probably scheduling. Yes, the writing was definitely inconsistent at times, and the biggest sin of them all was the absence of Lab's score. But I actually thought that this wasn't the terrible season like a lot of people are forcefully making it out to be. Don't get me wrong, y'all, the show has its criticisms for sure, but I also think that there was so many people just hating on this show because it's the cool thing to do to hate the most popular show, but yet they watched every single episode without fail. So this is the end of Euphoria. At the time of this recording, it has been confirmed by HBO and creator Sam Levinson that this was the series finale of Euphoria.
Euphoria ends here.
Yeah. In terms of the story that we set out to tell, which is a story about addiction and its consequences, this feels like the end to me.
So with that said, here are my final thoughts of this show Euphoria that started 7 years ago and 3 seasons in 7 years, which is crazy. But at the end of the day, this started off as a show about the highs and lows of addiction, but then it ended up being a show about redemption and seeking forgiveness and legacy. Taking a look at some of our main characters, for example, we have Cassie, who in my eyes represents like the hallowed nature of materialism, especially in this season, and the idea of like when you trap yourself in a cage of things, you eventually, metaphorically speaking, die inside that cage. You look at someone like Maddie, who I thought represent the raw survival of like the female existence and the industry that she was in. You look at Ali, or should I say Martin, he represents the matters of the world, which are accountability and stepping up and trying to do good for others. And lastly, we have Rue and her death, which to me was a defining moment of this finale. The character's legacy to me is and was about her ongoing battle with addiction, and for me, yes, it was tragic and extremely sad, but I felt that it was handled in a way that really worked. With all that being said, y'all, this will be the end of my breakdown of Euphoria Season 3. Man, I can't begin to express my appreciation and gratitude to you all that have made this my most successful breakdowns on my personal YouTube journey. Each week, you all showed so much love and support to my videos and my breakdowns, and each week, I couldn't believe the levels of engagement that you all showed. I've covered this show from the very beginning, and I know a lot of you all have been there from the start. Some of you all have maybe started the journey a couple days ago, or you're just finding me right now. I just want to thank every single one of you all for the support. It means the world to me, and again, I am forever grateful for the support you all have shown me throughout this journey. Now, if you all are watching this on YouTube, if you all can do me a favor, I would greatly appreciate it if you all can hit the like button. And if you're watching this on your computer, on your phone, or I believe even on your television, when you hit the like button, there's a hype button, which allows this video to get in front of new viewers. Which, speaking of viewers, if you all can share this video, hit the share button, man. Share this to anyone and everyone you know that either loves or hate this show or is indifferent about the show. I'd appreciate that share. But more importantly, share your thoughts in the comments, man. Like, this is why I make these videos. I want to interact with you all. I might not get to every comment, but you best believe I try to read as many as I can because I do appreciate you all's feedback and your thoughts. So in the comments now, let me know your thoughts on the finale, what worked, what didn't work. Let me know your thoughts about the entirety of this season, and also what will be your lasting memory? What will be the legacy of Euphoria in your eyes? Let's talk about that in the comments. And last but not least, this might be the end of this journey, but we got so much more to cover with movies and shows, so please consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. For my podcast listeners out there, I appreciate you all. Let me know what you all thought of the finale, what you all thought of the season and the legacy of the show in the comments section. Consider following the podcast, and I would love it if you all can give me a 5-star review. Put in the comments right now, hashtag RIP Rue. We're going to miss this character again, Zendaya. Coleman Domingo, the whole entire cast and crew. Thank you for these past 7 years, the ups and the downs. But again, this may be the end of this particular chapter, but please stick around with what I have coming up soon with more weekly TV breakdowns. Right now we're covering Widow's Bay. I'll of course be covering all the new movies coming out. So definitely, like I said, stick around and check out all that content. Again, y'all, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you all. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.